to the October 25th Parks and Recreation Commission meeting. And the first order of business is a roll call, please.
Chair Greenfield,
Here.
Commissioner Brown,
Here.
Commissioner Cribbs,
Here.
Commissioner Freeman. Here. Commissioner Kleinhaus. Commissioner Oche.
Yes, please.
Chair, that's 6 present.
Thank you. And next is the adoption of a resolution authorizing the use of teleconferencing for the Parks and Recreation Commission meeting during the COVID-19 state of emergency. Can I get a motion for this, please?
A motion to approve?
Thank you, and I'll second that. Can we get a vote, please?
Chair Greenfield,
Yes.
Commissioner Brown,
Yes.
Commissioner Cribbs,
Yes.
Commissioner Freeman. Yes. Commissioner Kleinhaus,
Yes.
Commissioner Oche.
Yes, please.
Chair, that's a 6-0 vote.
Thank you. And I see that Councilmember Du Bois is with us this evening as well. Thank you. Now's opportunity for public comment. If anybody would like to speak, please pass this speaker card to staff, or if you're online on Zoom, please raise your hand. And this is you want to speak to an item that's not on the agenda this evening.
Chair, we have 2 in-person public comments, and I see hands raised online as well.
Thank you. First speaker will be Rich Pearson. You have 3 minutes, please. Rich, if you could turn the mic on, please.
Good now? Thanks. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Rich Pearson. I'm a Palo Alto Pickleball Club board member. I'm a 16-year Palo Alto resident and an instructional aide at Duveneck Elementary. With respect, we were very disappointed by the commissioner's comments and reaction to the overwhelming support displayed for pickleball court night priority at the last meeting. Despite a lack of any supporting data, the commissioners seem intent on slowing down the inevitable and preventing pickleball from having court priority at Mitchell Park 7 nights a week. To highlight this increasingly urgent need for nighttime court priority, we launched a petition 1 week ago among Palo Alto residents to urge the Parks and Recreation Commission to grant pickleball night court priority 7 nights a week. This hard copy petition contains names, addresses, and signatures of Palo Alto residents. In just 7 days, we've collected nearly 400 signatures and will continue in our effort to educate the Palo Alto community about the inequitable night court situation in Palo Alto. Last meeting, each of you heard personal examples from Palo Alto residents why pickleball needs 7 nights a week priority at Mitchell, but I'll recap. Families with young children are unable to find a court at night, while lit tennis courts sit unused elsewhere in the city. Young working adults are unable to find a court at night, while lit tennis courts sit unused elsewhere in the city. Working parents are unable to find a court at night, the only time when they're able to play and get the mental health break they need, while lit tennis courts sit unused elsewhere in the city. Palo Alto residents are driving 3 miles to play at Mitchell Park at night, sometimes waiting an hour between games, because we're afraid of asking 2 tennis players to drive 2.3 miles to play at lit tennis courts that sit unused elsewhere in the city. We understand that you need to represent many interests and that change is hard, but there is a reason why only 5 people from the tennis community came last meeting, despite the staff's great efforts at making this issue very much public. The group losing access is tiny, and they have many, many other options for lit courts. Please do the right thing and recommend that pickleball be granted court priority 7 nights a week. The data overwhelmingly supports that such a change is the right one for Palo Alto. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Jimmy Young, followed by Ann Husty. And if any of you are speaking on a similar topic and you want to refer to comments made by a predecessor, please feel free in the interest of time. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jimmy Young. Just a little bit of myself. I'm a Palo Alto resident since 2010. I used to play tennis. I discovered pickleball, and it's a great sport with a lot of great people. I've met a lot of great friends through that. am here to talk about what happens at night. We have 7 pickleball courts we share with 2 tennis courts. Those 2 tennis courts, usually the tennis players play singles. There's 4 tennis players, but when they come, they displace 28 active pickleball players plus the people waiting. So sometimes there's like 40 people that get displaced when the 2 tennis courts are being used. So I'm just asking the city council to consider that when to give pickleball priority in the evening would serve the most active players on the pitch courts. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Ann Husty, followed by John Williams.
And you've been unmuted.
And this is not really Ann, but she's my wife, and this is her Zoom account. I don't know if I'm out of order.
Excuse me, if you could state your name, please, that would be helpful.
My name is Kip Husty, Ann Husty's husband. I don't know if I'm out of order here or whatever, but I'm commenting about the Measure E parcel. So if this is not the time, please let me know.
Yes, this is not the time. You'll be able to speak during public comment of that item's discussion. Thank you. John Williams, followed by Ronnie Fisher.
John, you've been unmuted. You have 3 minutes.
Hello, good evening. This is Monica, actually. Sorry. Monica Williams, representing the Palo Alto Pickleball Club. Please update the court usage policy for pickleball priority hours to be from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. 7 days a week. I do not understand why this decision cannot be made. Why do we have to wait another month for it to be on the agenda when it was on the agenda last month? Over 70 people came to the meeting, including children, and more attended on Zoom. Only 5 tennis players attended the meeting because most tennis players know that there are other empty tennis courts that they can play on at nighttime in Palo Alto. All we're asking for is time, nothing else, no change to the courts, no cost to the city, just time. The Palo Alto Pickleball Club has almost 900 members, more than half of whom are Palo Alto residents. The Palo Alto Tennis Club has 150 members. There are 51 tennis courts in Palo Alto, but Mitchell Park is the only pickleball facility in Palo Alto. We are not asking for more courts. We are asking for more priority time on the temporary courts that we have. Currently, we only have the courts from 8 a.m. until 3 p.m. We are requesting that we have the time extended for pickleball priority every day from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. It's unfair that Palo Alto youth do not have a place to play pickleball after school because the multi-use courts in Mitchell Park have tennis priority from 3 to 10 p.m. Mitchell Park is the ideal location for pickleball, and all players are currently happy with this beautiful facility as it is. No other Palo Alto parks can accommodate pickleball. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. And our final speaker will be Joseph Afong.
Joseph, you've been unmuted. You have 3 minutes.
Members of the Park and Recreation Committee, my name is Joseph Afong. I'm a Palo Alto resident. I attended the last commission meeting in September where court usage between pickleball and tennis was discussed. Commission members asked many questions, some of which were very good and some were repeated from past sessions. In order to facilitate future discussion, I suggest that the staff go over the transcript of the last meeting and provide answer to the commission members on each of the questions. This will provide valuable information for the commission members to make decisions and avoid having the same questions asked over and over again. Please make this document a part of the public record. Out of the many items discussed at the last meeting, I would like to bring up one item that is on the topic to get more input from tennis players. This topic was brought up more than a year ago. Staff had tried to get input from tennis players, and yet there is still a feeling among commission members and the staff that we need to solicit more input from tennis players. I think we have given enough time to solicit input from the tennis players. We cannot hold off to make critical decisions forever. The staff said that we have not received enough input from tennis players. I think the absence of such input is an input itself. I think the most accurate and unbiased view of course usage by both the tennis and pickleball players is already provided by the course usage surveys. We have had several surveys on the court usage over the past year and a half. The numbers are real and they speak for themselves. I think it is irresponsible to ignore these numbers. Let's use them to make your decisions. From the staff report, we know that the staff had genuinely tried very hard to get input from tennis players. But let's think, is it fair and equitable to give extra effort to solicit comment from just one group? You must be fair and give both group of players the same amount of effort. Overreaching to one group can indicate personal preference toward that group, thus bring questions into the legitimacy of the process. I advocate that we have an action plan with specific timeline going forward. Last year, we heard that the staff need to do surveys. We waited a year for the surveys. Now that surveys are done, let's move on with your decision making. We have the data to make the decision now. Let's not hold off making this decision. Part of residents need your decision in order to make the optimal usage of the limited city courts. People's lives are being affected by your decision or indecisions. Thank you for your time.
Thank you to the members of the public who's chosen to speak this evening. We'll next move on to agenda changes, additions, and deletions. Do any commissioners have anything they'd like to suggest? Then let's move on to the approval of the minutes. And do we have any members of the public who'd like to speak on this?
Yes, Chair, we do have one member of the public looking to speak.
Thank you. Herb Barak, you have 3 minutes.
All right. Thank you, Chair Greenfield. I appreciate it if you make a correction to my comments on the public comment, which is on the first page of the minutes. In the second sentence.
Excuse me, Herb, could you speak a little closer to the mic?
Get better mics. Okay.
Yeah,
Is that better?
Yes, thanks.
All right. On the first page on the public comment, I have a comment that's 2 sentences. The second sentence refers to fiber hut sites, plural. I referred to only a single site and identified it, so I'd appreciate it if you change the words fiber hut sites to a fiber hut site. And then add at the end of the sentence after project, a project at one of Brioni's Park. Thank you.
Thank you. Do any commissioners have any comments about the minutes? Ann,
I do, yes.
please.
On page 4, about line 13, I'm sorry, I can't get the minutes up on my screen, but page 4, line 13, the cost of what is it? The cost of lights or the cost of the courts? There was a cost range between 500,000 to 1 million, and I couldn't understand whether it was lights or courts. If we could just clarify that.
It says Commissioner Oche asked for clarification of the cost.
Yes, the cost of what? If that's possible.
We will follow up and make those updates.
Thank you.
And then on page 11, line 7, it should be Gamble Gardens. And on the same page, Commissioner Freeman was talking about a contract dropped out, but I believe it was a contractor that dropped out. That's part of Darren's staff report. And page 11, line 15 should be docent program. I think it says DOSA now. And then on page 13, line 18, I'd like to delete my comments about the final communication, but I don't have the type up here right now. I'm sorry. So
What page was that? 18?
it's page 13, line 18. My email says. maybe not. I don't want to take the time to find it, so you can leave it as it is. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Cribbs. Any other commissioners have any updates to the minutes? Barring that, can I get a motion to approve the minutes?
Oh, I move approval of the minutes.
Thank you, Commissioner Cribbs, seconded by Commissioner Freeman. Can we get a vote, please?
Chair Greenfield,
Yes.
Commissioner Brown,
Yes.
Commissioner Cribbs,
Yes.
Commissioner Freeman,
Yes.
Commissioner Kleinhaus,
Yes.
Commissioner Oche.
Yes, please.
Chair, that's a 6-0 vote.
Thank you. Next up is the department report.
Good evening, Darren Anderson, the Community Services Department. Our recruitment update, we're still recruiting for the vacant park irrigation position and for several open space technician hourly positions for open space. They're in the final interview process for the budget analyst and senior budget management analyst. Couple special events. We've got the Jack O'Jaunt Halloween event on Friday, October 28th, 6:30 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. at Lytton Plaza. Please come enjoy the jack-o'-lantern display and be sure to vote for the scariest, cutest, and most creative jack-o'-lanterns. The holiday tree lighting event will be at Lytton Plaza, and that'll be on Friday, December 2nd, 5:30 p.m. to 7 p.m. There'll be live entertainment and treats. There's a Veterans Day recognition on Monday, November 7th at 3 p.m. at the MacArthur Park Restaurant. This event's open to the public to recognize the service contributions of the veterans of our United States Armed Forces. There's a holiday toy drive. If you'd wish to donate to the yearly toy drive, please bring new and unwrapped toys, books, gift cards, or other gifts to the local drop-off locations between November 14th and December 14th. All toys are donated to local youth in need. And the drop-off locations include all the Palo Alto fire stations and libraries, as well as the Mitchell Park Community Center and Lucy Stern Community Center. The holiday decorating contest, this is December 14th through December 20th. City of Palo Alto invites you to decorate the exterior of your home, front door or window, or your business in a holiday-themed decor. Judging will take place between December 14th and 20th, and there will be 3 different categories. You can find more information, cityofpaloalto.org/decorating contests. An update on the infill at the Mayfield Soccer Complex. When we last spoke, I mentioned we were going to have a test plot done to ensure that we could remove the infill safely. That's been completed and successfully. They were able to remove about 95% of the infill in their little test plots. They did 4 without damaging the turf blades. Really pleased to see that. The contractor and staff feel confident that we'll be able to successfully remove the rest of the existing infill and install the new without problems. The bid was posted last Tuesday, and all bids are due by the end of day tomorrow. We're still aiming to have this work done towards the end of November, if possible. We'll have a better idea on the timing once the bid is closed and the contractor has been selected. We are aiming again to have the work done before the rainy season starts. The rain is a problem for this. It not only can't be done while it's wet, so you have to wait till it gets dry, but also impacts the quality of the work done, meaning you might not be able to remove as much infill if it's still wet. So we'll really be targeting the dry days as much as possible. And again, the work will take approximately 12 days to complete. And on a related note, all the lights at Mayfield Soccer Complex were replaced last week. An update on the Foothills Nature Preserve weekday entrance fee collection. As I had mentioned in our last commission meeting, we had anticipated that we would already be able to start charging the weekday entry fee and have our automated payment machine. Unfortunately, we're still working on finalizing the contract with the provider for that automated machine. And as soon as I have a date, we'll let you know in advance of us collecting that weekday fee. City Council approved the new skate park item last night on their consent calendar, and this authorizes the Friends of Palo Alto Parks to begin fundraising. And I'll be in touch with them and the skate park stakeholders to discuss that and see how the city can help support. The Magical Bridge Playground Improvement Project is scheduled to be completed by the end of day on Friday, October 28th. And there was a question from our last commission meeting about JMZ ticket prices. The director of the JMZ, John Aiken, explained to me that despite what people may have read in the press, they've not really looked at ticket fee increases for the FY24 budget yet. Increasing fees was mentioned as a mechanism that influences the cost recovery levels at a finance committee meeting, and the press erroneously published that we were announcing fee increases. But there have been no discussions to date regarding fee increases for the 2024 budget. And unfortunately, I know you'd like one, but I don't have any updates on the Coverly Gym situation. I'll keep inquiring and update you as I learn more and share. That concludes the department report.
Thank you, Darren. Do any commissioners have any questions for Darren regarding the department report?
Yeah, on the foothill charging, I guess, getting ready to charge a fee. You indicated that you were waiting for the machine to be delivered. So at this point, they're not charging until they actually receive the machine. Is that correct?
That's correct. And a couple days to troubleshoot, make sure it's up and running properly.
And is there communications that'll be going out to the public on that?
Yeah, that's the other buffer is once we have the machine, I want to allow at least 2 weeks that we get the communications out so people are aware and prepped.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have one quick follow-up question, Darren, regarding the Mayfield infill project and the success, 95% success rate. Do you know how that compares with the success rate at El Camino Park when the similar refurb was done there?
Yeah, they didn't do a test plot, and that one was fully covered by the contractor who did the install. So it was a little different scenario. I think they were more cautious and less aggressive in the removal. I couldn't say for sure on exactly how much, but given the analysis we've done after the fact, meaning looking at what they've removed, I would say it was probably closer to 60%, something like that. But that's just a really rough guess.
Okay, so it sounds like the work will be done at Mayfield, it will be significantly more effective than was done at El Camino Park.
I would anticipate far less of the old material coming up and clumping. I mean, it may be some, but it should be really minor.
Thanks. That's very helpful to hear. And we're looking at if we're replacing the infill, the carpet and the infill, redoing the turf on an 8-year cycle, that would be done potentially 2 years from now.
Right. I forgot one important point, Chair, and that is we've spoken to a contractor who's confident we could also stagger, meaning the work. So when we do it, we could leave one field open, close that one, and leave the other one open. So there should be one field in play at all times.
Yeah, I was going to mention that. Thank you. That's great. And that's very helpful. Any other questions from any commissioners before we move on? Nellis?
Yeah, just one more question on this stuff, a tag in on Jeff's question. You mentioned that tomorrow is the end of receiving the, I guess, the bids, right? Have you been satisfied with the number that you've been receiving on that? Is that something?
We haven't seen them yet, so we don't get them until the bid's completely closed.
So you really don't know what you.
Yeah, purchasing will review it and then send it to the department.
Okay, got it.
Thank you. Okay, our first order of business on our discussion item this evening is one of our favorite of the year. We get to meet with the leaders of the younger generation that will be following us and looking to see what's up with them and what we can learn from them and how we can support them in their endeavors. So we have the Palo Alto Youth Council presenting to us today.
Yes, sir. And Chair, if you don't mind, I'll introduce Chris Penaranda. He's the Recreation Coordinator with Community Services Department. He's here in person. And we've got Adam Howard, the Senior Program Manager with Community Services on Zoom. Welcome, Chris. Welcome.
Yes, thank you and welcome.
Good evening, Commissioners. Thank you for having us. Like Darren said, my name's Chris. I oversee our Palo Alto Youth Council. We're here today to report our accomplishments from last year and our goals and initiatives for this year. I will hand it off to our members so they can start the presentation.
Good evening, Commissioners. Thank you so much for making the time to speak with us today. First of all, I'll introduce myself. Hi, I'm Julia Zeitlin. I'm the president of the Palo Alto Youth Council this year. And we'd love to take this time to introduce ourselves more, reflect on our past events this past year, and then talk a little bit more about the upcoming year and hear from you then.
Yeah, hi everyone. Thank you so much for this opportunity to present to you. My name is Kaylee and I'm the secretary this year.
My name is Paul. I'm a senior. I am the vice president of the Palo Alto Youth Council this year. It's a pleasure to speak with all of you. So who are we? We are a group of 22 Palo Alto teens who are looking to make change in our community. We are from Gunn, Pali, Castellet, Nueva, Crystal Springs, Ocean Grove, and Priory. We have diversity, and our goals are to seek and educate our youth and plan initiatives to address the problems that we think are important.
So we also want to draw attention to the fact that we have 2 more people on the officer team, our public information officers. And as well as that, we have many other amazing members behind us.
Just to reflect a little bit on the 2021 to 2022, the year that PYC, the themes that we prioritized last year were mental health, college support, and climate action. And so we took into account what we thought were the most prevalent issues among the teen community. And then we'll talk more about the initiatives that we started to try to address these issues.
The first event that we planned last year was a movie night in Mitchell Park. This was a massive success as we had over 100 people in attendance in our audience that watched Ratatouille. It was a great way for people to de-stress and improve their mental health.
To address another one of our themes, college support, we held our annual final studies cram. So it was held on 3 days, and we had collaborative study groups, tutors, therapy dogs. We also provided dinner and had fun de-stressing games. And this provided an opportunity for students from local high schools to get together, study, and prep themselves for finals.
Following up on our theme of college support, we also hosted in the spring a college admissions panel to help students preparing to become future applicants learn a little bit more about the college process, as it's definitely changed since COVID. And so we had some great speakers, college counselors, as well as college students and admissions officers.
Also in the spring, we planned a climate fair where we had 10 nonprofits set up tables and booths in Mitchell Park in the circle, and they essentially presented to any onlookers that wanted to come sort of check out what their nonprofits were doing. This was great because it educated and spread more awareness about climate issues in our community, and more specifically, what local citizens can do to actually enact change and improve on them. Another mental health event that we had was Palapalooza. This was a fun event where Palo Alto youth came in and played a concert for onlookers and other people in attendance. There was food, there were drinks. It was another way for people to de-stress and take their mind off the pressure cooker that the Bay Area can be.
And moving into this year, so looking forward, we have 2 main themes. So mental health and civic education.
So a project that we're working on is a resource guide for mental health, both accessible through online and through paper copies. It includes terminologies on common conditions such as depression, anxiety, stress, and other misunderstood conditions such as bipolar disorder and schizophrenia. We'll also include eating disorders as well as relief techniques and treatment avenues like talking to counselors and hotlines, and it will be distributed through online high school media, social media, physical copies, flyers with QR codes that will link to the PDF copies, and we'll also spread it in the final study cram slam that will be another event that we're organizing later in the year. So with this project, we're mainly trying to tackle the mental health education as well as wellness around the teenage members of our society. Oh, yeah. I'm Matthew Lee, and I'm a junior at Woodside Priory School, and I'm a member of the Palo Alto Youth Council.
And this year, we're also planning another final study cram slam because of its success last year and in prior years. We anticipate it to be just as amazing, even better this year as well.
And one of our main projects this year is going to be a year-long project. It's a monthly newsletter. So we want to get Palo Alto teens more involved in civic education and political events. So every month we'll feature a new event or context. Our November edition features city council and school board candidates. And it's meant to kind of get people involved in the community, learn more about local politics and opportunities to engage. For example, we also have resources on pre-registering or registering to vote.
Another initiative or event that we are planning similar in this theme of civic education and engagement. In the next year, 2023, we hope to organize a city council meet and greet after the November 8th election to help bridge the gap between youth and our political leaders. And this will be a great opportunity for the new council to introduce themselves to students in the community.
Hello, my name is Annika Rathbul. I'm a sophomore at Pali and a member of the PAYC. So as we all know, the midterm elections are currently taking place, and there is generally very low engagement in local elections among young voters. Yet when teens vote, they are much more likely to become strong voters in the future. This, as well as other reasons, incentivize some of us to get 16 to 18-year-olds students to pre-register and register for the upcoming election. We recently created an infographic that we spread online to all Pali and Gun students through the heavily used Schoology platform. It contained information about city council and school board candidates and a link to a website that walks you through how to pre-register and register to vote. Additionally, a couple of us went to the Palo Alto Farmers Market last Sunday and set up a booth with information about local candidates and also resources to get registered to vote online.
There are too many people that we can list that we have to thank for helping our council. But firstly, we would like to thank Councilmember Gerstone and Commissioner Ann Cribbs. Both of them came to our retreat a couple months ago and galvanized everyone who was there. It was really important and special sort of speech that both of you gave. Also, our advisor, Chris Sanchez, he has been incredibly helpful to making all our ideas and events actually sort of come to fruition. And the Mitchell Park Community Center is where we hold our meetings. We're grateful that we were able to have that space. And lastly, to all our PAYC members for being so engaged and enthusiastic through every step of the process.
And then just thinking ahead for the upcoming year and beyond, we hope to continue addressing teen issues in Palo Alto, conducting relevant research on teen issues, hosting events geared towards the needs of our community, and then further public policy collaboration with the city council and commissions. And then we'd also like to take some of this time to ask you all how we as a council can best serve the Parks and Rec Commission, as well as what you would like to see from us. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for the presentation. It's a pleasure to and very refreshing to have you here with us this evening. I'll open it up to members of the commission to follow up with questions.
We have a round of applause, maybe? I thought that was really well done.
Thank you.
So Chair, I would just say that it really has been my privilege to be able to drop in on the youth council meetings on Tuesday. And I will look forward to doing more of that in the future. Commissioner Ocho will be with me next time we come in. So it's great that you'll be doing that as well. I'm excited about the participation from all the different schools. Congratulations on that outreach. That's great. And as for what you can do for us, we would love to be able to ask you questions about how you feel about some of the projects we're working on, things that are important to you, and have an even better line of communication. So from my perspective, that's what I'd like to see us create for the year. Thank you, and thank you very much.
Shawnee?
Thank you for the presentation and for coming tonight. You're doing amazing work and it's really nice to see your community thriving. Do any of you play pickleball?
Sometimes.
Just wondering because so many people came to speak to us about that. Thank you. And I think I would love for you all to be more involved if you have time and, reach out if you need to about any of the issues that we work on and see if you can get involved and learn about them. Thank you.
Maybe we should also ask if any of you play tennis.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Oche?
I have a lot to say, but I just want to appreciate you for being here tonight. What I want to see more of is just like Commissioner Klein has said, we want more of your input, but also I want to see you invite us more for your events. Yeah, and then possibly maybe have a mentorship platform for younger people as well. So you can pass the baton and have, people ready to take over from you when you leave the council, and also to encourage you to continue to embrace civic duties. In general, I appreciate all that you're doing. It's obvious that you put a lot of effort into this. Thank you, Chris, and thank you, Adam. I don't know if he's here. Just to appreciate everyone who has, made this happen, and hope to see more of you if you have time, like she said. Thank you.
Commissioner Brown?
Wow, guys, that was very impressive. And thank you for your diligent work. Your turnout of your events is extremely impressive and they sound like a lot of fun. I wish they had that when I was in high school. I think the civic education and engagement efforts that you have planned for next year are wonderful, and it makes me very happy to see that as a priority for the Youth Council. And I just want to alert you that all of the commissions develop annual work plans and we set priorities, and the City Council also sets priorities. And so I would encourage you to attend those sessions when the time allows, and be an observer, maybe contribute to what you want to see happening in the city of Palo Alto, and then also being able to report back in that feedback loop to others in the community. I think that would be a really great opportunity to share a two-way communication with civic activities. Thanks.
Commissioner Freeman?
Yes, I would just want to reach out to say thank you guys for your participation and also being part of what is a really great group. What I'm hoping you can get from us would be, this is Park and Rec, so it's the fun committee. So there's a lot of alignment between what you guys do. And I think knowing some of the projects that we're working on, and maybe there's some of the things that we haven't thought about that would be of benefit to you as in your role and communicating with others across as well would be things that would bring to our attention so we can focus on making sure that we're reaching out to help you as well. One question I guess I would ask is how do you go about reaching out to other youth, not only within the world that you're in, but maybe some of the other communities?
So we have a bunch of different ways that we've tried to sort of communicate with the youth in Palo Alto, whether that's looking on Gun or Pally's student councils and sending emails to them, asking them if they can post news about our events or initiatives in their daily agendas or morning announcements. We also use social media as a tool to sort of empower our voice and spread the word about any events and activities that we have.
Okay, thank you. And keep up the good work. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Oh, another comment as to that, there are actually a lot of teen groups in Palo Alto. So we'll reach out a lot to, for example, Teen Arts Council, the Teen Library Advisory Board, and through that, we got a lot of engagement.
Vice Chair Lemare.
Yeah, appreciate you guys being here and being so engaged with what you do, and particularly the focus on mental health and
being able to reach out to others. And I think that that's extremely important. And for you guys to know, a youth voice is important. And if you guys ever have anything of interest to you within the city or concerns within the city, if you come to a city council meeting and speak, or you come to a commission meeting and speak, your voice actually carries more than others because it's unique. And we don't get as many youth coming to speak to us. And it's important for us to hear. And if you do it, I guarantee you, people will listen to you. But you have to come to a meeting. You have to come and make public comment. You have to, and it can be through Zoom. But if you do that and you have concerns or you have things that you want to see change, it can happen. And what you guys are doing now is a great step to that. But I would certainly encourage you, if there is anything on your mind, certainly come to a meeting and speak up. And people do listen, and especially to the voice of the youth.
And I want to echo what the vice chair has said, that your voices really are well heard. Take advantage of it. We want to hear it, and it's a good opportunity for you, and it's a good experience for you to be civically involved, and it will lead to being more civically involved throughout your life in many cases, which is great for our communities. Overall, the breadth of the work you're doing and the decisions and the priorities you're making, it's really awesome to see, and it's very encouraging. I also kind of following up on what Commissioner Freeman was asking about, how you publicize things. I was wondering, so what is your interaction with the local high schools with Gunn and Pally? Can you explain?
We have a fair amount of members from a variety of schools, and so that actually helps us engage more. I think also some of our members are also members of student government. And so I think student government is a really great main way that we use to communicate with everyone. Anything to add?
Another thing is that in the recent project that we were talking about, which we reached out to schools and got teenagers to pre-register and register to vote. I know that at Pally, we reached out directly to the administration and they were a huge help. They published it on Schoology, which is where all of our assignments and everything are, so that more people could see it. So we have a lot of support in that area as well.
Great, that's awesome. I was curious to see that you did your own college admissions panel. I'm wondering how this compares with some of the panels that the schools have been doing. What is the focus that you may have that might be a little bit different and more catering directly to students' wishes that some of the schools might not be doing so much?
I think in the case of the college admissions panel we organized last year, we did have support from college counselors, and so they were able to provide advice. Also, something unique was that we also had voices from students currently in college, and we thought that was kind of a helpful addition to not just admissions officers and whatnot.
Thank you. And last thing, it was great to hear that you do have a city council meet and greet on your agenda. It seems like being able to shadow city council members or something like that would be really invaluable. And I also wanted to throw out the idea to staff and to your group, if there would be any interest to have a similar type of meet and greet with the Parks and Recreation Commission outside a meeting to get together and sit down and talk about things on a more casual and open basis. That would be something we could look to pursue in the future.
Yes, absolutely. I think we're as a council, we're always trying to sort of reduce the stagnation between sort of government and citizens, and having meet and greets with anyone who occupies a position in government, in city government, and letting them speak to our citizens in an informal way, maybe over coffee, is fantastic. So yeah, we would definitely be interested in so.
That's great. And the staff thinks that this is something that we could move forward with as well. I'm seeing a thumbs up in the back there. Yeah,
sure, we can make that.
That's great. Well, thank you very much again. And look forward to building building some additional bridges with the youth community. The Parks and Rec Commission covers a lot of different topics, and I think one of the areas that we would like to do more in is being able to support youth programming for all levels in high school and other grades. So any inroads we can make and progress would be really helpful and productive. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
And thank you to all of you who have attended. Showing support for your group is great to see, and it makes a difference as well to see a full chamber and people attending to support your peers and your organization. Okay, next up is the Park Dedication Measure E site action. This is a subject that was at the Parks and Rec Commission last month for discussion. This is part of our work plan commitment based on feedback from council to consider a recommendation to City Council regarding the potential rededication of the Measure E site at the Palo Alto Baylands. And if there's any members of the public who would like to speak, please make sure you have a speaker card in or raise your hand via Zoom. When we did speak, or when we did meet last month, there wasn't really any opposition to what we were suggesting. I expect that'd be a little bit different based on the emails we've received. It's great to get the feedback from the community, and look forward to hearing what the members of the public would like to say after following the staff report. Darren Anderson.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Darren Anderson with the Community Services Department. As the Chair mentioned, this is an action item seeking your recommendation to City Council to dedicate the 10-acre Measure E site as parkland. Some of this is going to be repeat from last month, but I think it might be worth doing. Again, just a quick orientation. The blue section is the 10-acre Measure E site. It's got Bixby on one side, the Regional Water Quality Control Plant on the other, and to the right, the Emily Renzel Wetlands, and to the left, the tidal section of the Baylands. It was in November 2011 that Measure E passed. That undedicated the 10 acres for a 10-year term to be used for an energy compost facility. The 10 acres would be reserved exclusively for that purpose until November 2021. And after that date, City Council may choose to return the area or parts of it to parkland. And then December 2014, City Council directed staff not to pursue the development of the compost facility. Staff had concluded that the compost facility was not cost effective. Palo Alto's yard trimmings and food scraps are instead taken to a dry anaerobic digester in San Jose. Here are some of those key sections from the ballot measure. This first is the question that was posed to voters on the ballot. Just to reiterate, shall 10 acres of the existing parkland in Bixby Park be undedicated for the exclusive purpose of building a processing facility for yard trimmings, food waste, and other organic material? Second bullet point mentions that the property will be undedicated for that exclusive purpose. The third mentions that 10 years after the initiative, that council may rededicate any portion of the property not utilized for the purposes of the initiative. And lastly, that other uses than parkland or processing facility would require a new vote of the Palo Alto residents. In August, the ad hoc committee and staff met with Public Works, and Public Works staff had explained that their department has no foreseeable projects or staff proposals for the future use of the Measure E site. Excuse me. And then in September, we had met with the Utilities Advisory Commission Chair and staff liaison to have the same discussion on Measure E. And they explained the Utilities Department has no plans for Measure E site at this time, and they have no concerns with the PRC moving forward and pursuing dedicating the site as parkland. The ad hoc committee had the following reasons for pursuing dedicating the Measure E site: that it could only be used for this exclusive purpose that we've already identified, that any non-parkland use other than the one exactly specified Measure E would require a new vote of the people, and neither of the Public Works or Utilities departments had plans for the site. The Measure E site includes a wildlife habitat corridor between the Renzel wetlands and the bay that should be protected. It's also an open space area that provides valuable habitat for wildlife. And there's a trail connection loop around for Bixby Park. It's also a good place to have trees to help buffer the view between Bixby Park and the water treatment plant. And if it's parkland, it has a greater opportunity of getting grants. Once again, as dedicated parkland, Measure E site would be limited to park, playground, recreation, or conservation purposes. And lastly, the next steps would be to bring this to council pending your vote this evening. And Chair, that concludes staff presentation.
Thank you, Darren. I see that we have 6 hands raised on via Zoom. And how many speaker cards do you have, Javad?
We have 4 in-person speakers as well as the 6 hands raised online, 10 total.
Okay, so we have a total of 10 people. I'm going to go ahead and give you 3 minutes to speak. If you can articulate what you want to share with us in less time than that, that's always appreciated. And if you want to refer to items or comments made by people speaking before you, please do. Our first speaker will be Peter Dreckmeyer, followed by Elaine Isbizri.
Good evening, Peter Dreckmeyer. Tonight I'm representing Page Palatins for Green Energy. We were the sponsors of Measure E in 2011. I grew up in Palo Alto, recycling, conserving water during the 76, 77 drought, riding my bike on all the great bicycle boulevards, and exploring the foothills and the Baylands. I love nature. Palo Alto was a great place to grow up, and it shaped my environmentalism, which has been my career. And in high school, I would come into these chambers, usually for a school assignment, and listen to the city council. And my 2 favorite council members were Emily Renzel and Ellen Fletcher, 2 great environmentalists. And 25 years later, they were on opposite sides of Measure E. Measure E came out of a series of events. In 2008, I believe, I was sitting up where you are. I was on the city council, and the dump was going to close and be converted to parkland, 156 acres. Some of us were very concerned. We had a very effective compost operation there where we didn't have to truck our yard waste away and we could have compost available to the public. That was all going to go down to Gilroy, which is in the county, but further away than Tracy. So we talked about, what are some options for keeping composting? The issue was sent to the Parks and Recreation Commission, and they said it'd be better as parkland. But it was also sent to the Planning and Transportation Commission, and they said, we don't know a lot about this. You should create a blue ribbon task force and look at all 3 waste streams: sewage sludge, organic waste streams, sewage sludge, yard waste, and food waste. And they did. A group of 9 people met many times. They recommended anaerobic digestion. And we needed land, so a group came together to create Page for Measure E. We were expecting to collect 2,200 valid signatures, but the date of the council elections got changed to even years, so we had to get 4,400. And we ended up getting over 6,000, and Measure E passed with 65% of the vote. Now, I ask, what's the rush to rededicate it as parkland? What do we gain? I don't think much is going to change there. I don't think we're going to invest in park benches or soccer fields. I mean, it smells bad. And I would argue it's the worst location in all of Palo Alto for a park. And yet it's the best location for waste conversion. We got our sewage sludge there. We've got wastewater. It's an opportunity. So all we do is lose an opportunity that people are passionate about. I mean, we got 2/3 of the vote. I think it would be higher today. So I encourage you to hear from us. We didn't know about this until I got a call from a reporter on Friday. Unless there's a real vision for the site, why rush it? There's really no benefit. Thank you. I'm sorry I went over a little bit.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Karen P., followed by Ronnie Fisher.
Chair, we have 3 more in-person speakers.
I'm sorry, look, reading on the wrong list. Elaine Esbizri, followed by Jeff Brown. Thank you.
Hello, my name's Elaine Elbisry with an L, not an S, Elbisry. I just pulled together a few thoughts when I learned about this situation just a couple of days ago, actually. So I've just sat down and thought about what happened and what could happen now. So anyway, good evening, commissioners. Thank you for taking on the daunting task of taking care of our parks and recreation. I've lived in Palo Alto for more than 30 years. I've enjoyed many hours in the parks at Greer, Eleanor Pardee, Mitchell, Foothills Park, and most of all the others. My grandchildren learned to ride their bikes in the parks. There's no shortage of places to enjoy outdoors in Palo Alto. Many times since 2010, I have walked with friends and visitors and dogs in Bixby, where you can see the 10 acres nestled right next to the sewage processing plant. But as Peter said, those 10 acres are not an inviting spot for hiking. I wonder if any of you were part of the Measure E campaign. It was invigorating. On the one hand, we were progressing locally to address climate change. On the other hand, many environmentalists recalled how they had fought against the massive encroachment on land and destruction of the wetlands in Palo Alto and beyond. They saw Measure E as a resurgent to that. However, it was not a difficult task for us to speak with many residents who knew that climate change is here and now and that it imposes a burden on all of us. They accepted the idea of using an anaerobic digestion to make use of solid waste and provide gas to our own city. However, Measure E meant we would be able to put a system in place to contribute to Palo Alto's goals of sustainability and zero waste. Since then, technology has developed new and successful methods to address municipal waste disposal. Palo Alto is in a perfect place to introduce these advances. We have the voters' choice of 10 acres to go ahead and develop a state-of-the-art method. When I learned of your meeting tonight, I Googled. I found a plethora of information and research on much that is going on locally, across the US, internationally, to address municipal sewage disposal. You only need a few minutes to learn about pyrolysis works that breaks down and changes chemical structures to produce new usable materials.
Thank you, Elaine.
Acres to parkland.
Thank you. Jeff Brown, followed by Herb Borak.
Thank you, commissioners. I'm here tonight to ask you not to recommend to the city council to rededicate the Measure E site as parkland. First, in 2011, 65% of the voters voted to have that land put aside for future use as a bioenergy, to be the site of a bioenergy facility. Bio-waste, rotting organic matter is one of the major sources, if not the major source of forming gases, particularly methane, that trap heat in our atmosphere. And water treatment byproduct, sewage sludge, is one of the biggest sources of biomass, of bio-waste. So what better place to site a bioenergy facility than being directly adjacent to a sewage treatment plant? I would contend there is no better place, and there is no other suitable place in Palo Alto to do that. I'm troubled by the fact that the ad hoc committee did not talk to any of the supporters or promoters of Measure E before coming to the full commission with its recommendation. That kind of suggests that there was an agenda in place already. And I'd like to believe that that's not the case. But even if the Measure E site were a suitable place for a parkland, what's the rush? There is no rush. The only rush would be if to prevent the use of that land for a bioenergy facility. There again, that speaks of an agenda. So I'm troubled by that. The report suggests that the reasons for pursuing dedication include the fact that neither the Public Works nor Utilities departments have plans for the Measure East site. Really? I wouldn't expect them to have plans for the Measure East site, particularly when they were instructed in 2014 not to formulate any. And given that their ledgers are pretty much full, keeping the sewage running and the lights on in the city. I mean, I sympathize with the workers in those departments, but they're not tasked with developing visionary plans. And their old staff report saying that a biomass energy facility was not economically feasible. Economic feasibility rarely, well, never actually, encompasses environmental loss. So economics and environment are always at opposition with one another. So finally, I understand your commission's interest, this commission's interest is in providing parkland for Palo Altans. However, I'm asking you to extend your perspective beyond that to providing a future for Palo Altans, like the children, they are to me, kids who are here tonight, the students.
Thank you, Jeff.
Young adults.
Thank you.
So please do not recommend this.
So I see we have more hands raised. So let's cut off speakers after the end of this speaker. So we'll if anybody else wants to speak, please raise your hand. Please raise your hand now. We have Herb Borak, followed by Karen P.
Thank you. I support the recommendation for the council to dedicate this land as park. If the proponents of the initiative thought that it could collect the signatures to qualify and to pass the initiative without including a provision that the council could rededicate the parkland in 10 years, they wouldn't have included it in the initiative. Now suddenly people are talking as if the initiative was only about studying the area and for an energy facility, but it had nothing to do with giving the council that power. Normally, if you want to do a project and for environmentalists, you'd have an environmental impact report and study alternatives and mitigations, but you can evade that requirement by doing an initiative measure. That's not environmentalism. The facility in Redwood City, Bioforce Tech's facility of pyrolysis, was discussed in the paper. As far as where one does things, when the city made a decision in Palo Alto not to go ahead with an anaerobic digestion facility, Phil Bobo, the Assistant Director of Public Works, got the quote of the week in the Palo Alto Weekly of August 4th, 2017. He said, what the city does with its waste is more important than where it does it. As far as that pyrolysis facility, that was discussed by NBC Bay Area News.com on May 4th, 2017. Whiffs of thousands of tons of sewage sludge are unmistakable from the lunch patio of Bioforce Tech, which is located there. That process is different from what we have now. We dewater. We have a sludge facility, $25 million loan that needs to be repaid. That removes all of the water. And where is that going? We now have plans for an advanced water purification facility. But the pyrolysis project uses 30% of that water. Well, it can't use the water that's going to the advanced purification facility. And I don't know how much our 22 million gallons a day of sewage is water, but whatever it is, 30% of that's the equivalent in water would be need as part of the feed into the pyrolysis project. This is not the first time a proponent of Measure E has come and said, well, let's use the Measure E site for something else. Valley Water and the city are having a recycled water transfer facility, which we placed at Los Altos treatment plant site. But before that decision was made, another proponent, Walt Hayes, said that it should be on the Measure E site. And that the proponents of who qualified the Measure E initiative would actually go ahead and do another initiative so that that Valley Water site could be put on the Measure E site. For some reason, people are fixated on removing that 10 acres and leaving it removed from parkland, regardless of what's put on it. My time's up, so I won't go over time.
Thank you, Herb. Next up is Karen P., followed by Ronnie Fisher.
Thank you. My name is Karen Porter. By any chance, is it possible to share my screen for a slide presentation?
Is that possible? Jawad, thank you.
Yeah, Karen, you have been promoted to a panelist. You will need to accept and share your screen.
Okay. Don't know how to do that exactly. Oh, here we go. Okay.
Let's restart the clock.
You should have access to share your screen, Karen.
I think you have to unshare your screen so that she can share hers.
Yeah, I can't start share screen while the other participant is sharing.
Please try again.
Okay. Is it possible also to reset my time? Okay, how's that?
We are now viewing your screen. Your 3 minutes start now.
Thanks very much. As I'd like to expand on why the Measure E site is probably the worst location for expanded parkland. It's kind of indicated in purple here where it's situated just south of the wastewater treatment plant, and also happens to be just on the other side of the treatment plant is the Palo Alto Airport. So it is directly under the flight path for arriving flights into Palo Alto Airport. Palo Alto Airport is the busiest single runway airport in the state. This is just a view of it. This is from the Palo Alto website. Let me just give you an idea. This I've captured on a flight tracking app today. These were 3 planes, in a matter of probably a half an hour, tracking those flights going in and out of the Palo Alto Airport. The arrow shows where the Measure E parcel is. And this is a typical pattern. I'll show you the next slide shows this was just one single piston engine plane making many loops. I think probably doing what are called touch and go landings at Palo Alto Airport. But again, you can see the trajectory right over Bixby and particularly the Measure E parcel. And at the Measure E parcel, this particular flight was at an altitude of 200 feet. So in addition to the noise generated by those arrivals, there is a problem with leaded fuel emissions from piston engine planes. The East Environmental Protection Agency is in the process, once again, of generating finding that lead emissions from aircraft engines contribute to air pollution that may reasonably be anticipated to endanger public health and welfare. And these piston engine planes are the small aircraft that carry 2 to 10 passengers, which are frequent users of Palo Alto Airport. What's the problem with lead? Lead exposure, this again is from the East Environmental Protection Agency. Lead exposure to children can cause irreversible and lifelong health effects. There's no safe blood level for lead in children that has been identified. And in adults, it's also bad. It can cause cardiovascular effects, blood pressure, hypertension, and so on. So how does that pertain to the Palo Alto Airport? Well, our airport has the dubious distinction of being named in August 2021 as the 19th of 100 top lead polluting airports in the United States. The entity that compiled this list is an environmental legal organization called Earth Justice. And what I wasn't able to show on this slide in particular, there's also an issue with takeoffs from the airport going right over East Palo Alto, but that subject is for another day. So in conclusion, you've got low flying, lead emitting planes going directly over this park site, and it's just not healthy. As far as I'm concerned, the best and only use would be as an anaerobic digester or something that serves some environmentally beneficial purpose, and it just is not suited for a parkland. Thank you.
Thank you. And our next speaker is Ronnie Fisher, followed by Susan Desjardins.
Ronnie, you've been unmuted. You have 3 minutes.
Good evening, Chair Greenfeld and Commissioners. My name is Ronnie Fisher, and I represent the Santa Clara Valley Audubon Society. Our organization supports the rededication of Bixby Park at the Measure E site. The flat area between the Bixby Hill and the Palo Alto Regional Water Quality Control Plant is an important wildlife corridor and is also used by many people who come to enjoy the park and take loop trails. It creates a natural connection between Harbor Marsh and the Emily Renzel wetlands, and is not where an industrial facility with all the impacts that industry brings, light, noise, smells, and traffic belongs. Palo Alto is planning many projects by the bay, including 2 water recycling facilities. The planned water desalination plant within the water quality control plant will remove a large grove of trees. The Measure E site along the water quality control plant can provide a place to plant a new grove of native trees and provide for the wildlife and migratory birds with the shelter and resources that they need. People may not play soccer or fly a kite here, but open space is important. The area has been neglected for 10 years in limbo, waiting for new technologies to emerge for Palo Alto's organic waste streams. A silver bullet has not yet been found. Please do not again wait for some other new promising technologies to be found. Instead, rededicate the park, and in the future, if new technologies are deemed effective and feasible and no other location is identified, offer these solutions to Palo Alto residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan Desjardins, followed by Debbie Montils. Apologies if I mispronounced your name.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Chair Greenfield and Commissioners. My name is Susan Desjardins, and I'm the chair of Sierra Club's San Francisco Bay Alive campaign. The San Francisco Bay is a critical habitat for fish, birds, and other wildlife. It's a complex living ecosystem central to our identity, our economy, and the beauty of the region. Urban and industrial growth have put pressure on the bay's environmental health. Climate change, including sea level rise and groundwater rise impacts, compound those pressures, posing an urgent threat to both ecosystems and human activities in and around the bay. In response to these threats, the Sierra Club chapters that border the bay, Loma Prieta, the San Francisco Bay, and the Redwood chapters have developed a campaign to protect and restore the bay's ecosystems so that they remain a vibrant place for wildlife, a buffer against pollution and climate change impacts, and a recreational resource for future generations. I am here tonight to support the restoration of the Measure E site parkland. We understand a lot more today than we did 10 years ago, and we must start embracing nature-based solutions sea level rise and distance industrial development away from the bay. This site, a critical corridor between Harbor Marsh and the Emily Renzel wetlands, can and should be restored to provide a functioning hydrological and habitat connection and afford better resilience to sea level rise for Palo Alto residents and for the rich fauna of the Baylands. This site needs tender loving care, not industrialization. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight.
Thank you, Susan. Debbie Mitels, followed by Susan Stansbury.
Hello, good evening, commissioners. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, thank you.
Great, okay. Well, as one of the 64% of Palo Alto voters who supported Measure E back in 2011, I've really been disappointed that the city has not yet made progress on using the Measure E site for some kind of an innovative, forward-looking approach to handling our city's waste. I'm a 40 years or more resident here, and I walk frequently out in the Baylands, and the site there is really situated right next to the water treatment plant. It's really not suitable for parkland. We have lots of other parkland close by, but that is not the place I'd like to walk. But it is located in the midst of other sustainability services, and that's really what we voters wanted to happen. And right now in Redwood City, they're using another innovative technology called pyrolysis to handle their city's sewage. This process creates biogas, which can be used to fuel its operations, and also biochar, which sequesters carbon into a useful fertilizer. But instead of exploring how we can use the site as the voters intended for green infrastructure, we are hauling our waste away to the Central Valley in big trucks, using polluting diesel fuels and spewing out greenhouse gases that contribute to climate change. The city really needs to follow the voters' directions and refer this discussion to the Planning and Transportation Commission, which handles land use decisions. Let's take some time and plan to use this site for innovative projects that reduce and not increase our city's carbon footprint. Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie. Susan Stansbury, followed by a Zoom caller.
Good evening, commission members. My name is Susan Stansbury, and I'm a longtime resident of Palo Alto. I was disappointed to hear that you are considering converting the Measure E site into parkland. As you know, Measure E passed by nearly 65% of the Palo Alto voters to give us the ability to handle our organic waste locally. While the site hasn't yet been used for organic waste conversion, technology has advanced in recent years, and building this infrastructure will help the city reach its ambitious and much needed climate action plan goals. New technologies such as pyrolysis can convert our biosolids into clean energy and biochar, which is a valuable nutrient-rich soil amendment. This is a far better scenario than trucking our organic waste many miles away to get handled as we currently do. Conversely, the site location is not ideal for parkland. Being right next to the wastewater treatment, it's smelly and it's not attractive. And due to its location, it's not suitable to convert into wetlands. We have many beautiful parks, and I don't believe people would want to spend time there. Finally, if the Parks and Rec Commission truly believes this land would be better as parkland, let the voters decide again, as we had majority approval for the other plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. We now have a Zoom caller. Please introduce yourself, followed by Michael Ferreira.
Yeah, it's my name is not Zoom. My name's Bob Winslow. And I think that it showed the Neighbors Abroad was unintentional, but having just returned from visiting our sister city in Palo, as you saw in my written remarks, I'm struck at the consequence of our emissions here in Palo Alto and our consumption, and those less fortunate who are impacted by our consumption. A lot of the reason why we work to do Measure E is that a city ultimately needs infrastructure for sustainability. You cannot accomplish sustainability goals for a city without land for infrastructure. And certainly the opponents will claim that infrastructure is industrialization. They would call our wastewater treatment plant an industrial plant. And that's obviously a false framing, because it's essential that we minimize our water quality impact on the community. The other thing is to introduce the concept of environmental justice. We need to balance the interest of preservation, which as many of us adore our role in preservation, but towards the impacts and consequences of our efforts to create if you want to call it a pristine bubble here in Palo Alto, and ship our waste materials to the Central Valley and the South Valley, where we impact economically distressed communities. And so there's a responsibility for communities like Palo Alto to do their fair share. And so the comments here on preservation are symmetric even to our housing questions, where we choose not to, if you will, have our fair share of housing because we want to live sort of in what we might call our own little bubble. In closing, I was inspired by the commission's statement of talking to our youth commission, and the youth council, and why not talk to them about this issue? Because I know that climate change and the impact of climate change is a top priority among our youth. And I would welcome you engaging with the youth, asking them their consideration, so that we can ultimately make a decision of preserving this land towards important sustainability infrastructure. Thank you very much. And it's Bob Winslow, BOBWENZLAU, Palo Alto resident. Thank you.
Thanks, Bob. Michael Ferreira, followed by Kip Husty.
Good evening, commissioners. My name is Mike Ferreira, a former Palo Alto resident, and currently on the executive committee of the Sierra Club's Loma Prieta chapter, and a former conservation chair. I, of course, second what Susan Desjardins had to say. I would also like to relate that I was the conservation chair when we had several stormy meetings of the Conservation Committee over the then proposed Measure E. And when it came down to a final vote, the vote was 11 in opposition and 2 in favor. Now, we did not go walk on to the next logical motion, which would be to formally oppose. We did that. We made that decision just because there was so much division that we really didn't want to get into it, that we didn't think that would be productive. As I look back, I think that might have been an error. We heard every side of this issue. There's something about taking away parkland, undedicating parkland, that just goes against the grain. Now, the Measure E folks have had their 10 years to come up with something, and right now what they have is nothing, more futurism. It was a mistake. It was a mistake taken in good faith, but it was a mistake to undedicate that parkland, and I commend the commission for wanting to put it back. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Next up is Kip Husty, followed by Eileen McLaughlin.
Hello. I have 2 points, and one is
more directly to the proposal, and one is more of a process issue. And the process deals, I think it's good for any high schoolers who are around to take a look at it. And I'm no spring chicken, so I hope I'm listened to. Anyway, the vote was clear, and to bring up that it was, they don't have the, you can't do any other form of materials, any other materials to be converted at that site without a ballot initiative is just disingenuous, because that can be done. We have to allow people a chance to do these things. You might say it's been 10 years, but there's been an awful lot of delays in there. 10 years on plannings and things. I mean, the technology has advanced. There's no real dire emergency. Now, if there was a dire emergency, then yes, but if there was a dire emergency, and for all the people, I love the Baylands and I want to restore them as much as possible, but there are plenty of takers of land out there, offices, airports, golf course, car dealerships. They all butt up against the bay. When did the people vote on those places? Is it just too hard to confront those powers? And but it's not so hard to pick on some environmental activists. No, I don't think that's. I think we need to take some time here and give plenty of input, and let all the commissions who might be interested in this have an input. And let all the people who have an interest in this have a fair and full hearing on it, and not sequester it away into parkland. The animals don't need the title parkland to be able to use that. And while it sits, they can use it. And anybody, I'm all for dedicating some money to restoring, however temporary, some more trees at that site, some more bushes. But let's not shoot ourselves in the foot. It's reasonable alternative, and it's future oriented. We need to, in this, deal with our own sludge. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Eileen McLaughlin, followed by Cedric.
Good evening, commissioners. I'm Eileen McLaughlin, and I represent the Citizens Committee to Complete the Refuge. We've talked about a lot of things here. I've been listening to the other speakers, and I wonder about these 10 acres that have been looked at as, well, this isn't even good parkland. And well, if you have 10 acres and it's an empty 10 acres in the middle of your neighborhood and nobody does anything with it, it's going to look like, pretty much a shoddy place to be around. So I cannot, that's just not viable here. But I want to look more at what the value of this land is. Palo Alto was an early leader in the Bay in preserving wetlands along the Bay, and the Baylands are the result of that. And it's all of this lowland, when we're looking at sea level rise, if you want to talk about future, because sea level rise is already encroaching. And in fact, the city is working with the Corps of Engineers on planning a sea level rise levee. But the fact is, with sea level rise, we get groundwater rise. Now, groundwater problems are no news to Palo Altans, I know. But what we're not thinking about is that as the sea level rises, all of these lands on the wetlands, including the lower lands that are part of this parcel, going back and connecting to the Emily Rensville wetlands, are lowlands where waters are going to be closer to the surface. The groundwater is going to be making everything more wet, and the vegetation that can come out of it will be saltwater type vegetation. We already have that kind of wetland inside the golf course. It's going to be emerging in other places as well. It's going to be enriching the wetlands. In fact, and there is also that restoration of a horizontal levee that's going into the main marsh there, right by this particular property. There is an enormous restoration possibilities here when we're trying to protect everything we can along the shoreline, because marshes protect us. Tidal marshes have the quality of being carbon exchange engines, and they cost nothing when we allow them to develop. And this is the kind of place where we can get it. And we can get a connector even because of the changes in land that's coming along between here and the Emily Renzel wetlands. Even more protection for the city of Palo Alto, and at very little cost and very little mystery either. It's a restoration process. So we're taking nature here, which is already here and can grow and expand and be of much more, probably much more value over time than this plant that we still don't know what it would be and if it would be. So I strongly recommend that we keep this land as parkland, allow it to be restored. Just don't try to think you can plant a few trees on it, but make it fit into the environment around it. And, for the many times I have been in the Baylands, I have seen so many people out there for the very same reason, enjoying the space, enjoying the marshes, enjoying the wildlife, enjoying the views, escaping from the busyness of the rest of the city and even of the parks where all of the playgrounds exist. It's a special, special place for wildlife and for people and for marshes. And it should be treasured by the city and as much done to preserve it as you can. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Cedric, followed by Karen Holman.
Good evening, commissioners. I'm also calling in to ask you to please not seek rededication of the Measure E site back to parkland. I was on the compost task force in 2009, and we studied what the city could do with its sewage and yard scraps and food scraps after the landfill closed. The task force was expressly directed to avoid the use of parkland, and we ended up recommending processing of our municipal organics at a site across the street from the wastewater treatment plant at the airport. Due to the impacts on current and future airport operations, our recommendation was rejected, but the city commissioned a feasibility study for doing anaerobic digestion on the Measure E site and other alternatives. This study showed that this was the best option at the time from both a financial and a climate emissions perspective. Unfortunately, at the time, the council did not opt to pursue that opportunity. The city did, however, shut down the sewage sludge incinerator, and instead our sewage is dewatered on site, then trucked to a distant site down near Gilroy. Our yard trimmings and food scraps are sent to San Jose, where they are anaerobically digested with San Jose's sewage. Because we are not handling our organic waste, our organic materials locally, there are many, many trucks moving materials hundreds of miles, which has a large climate impact. Technologies which at the time were cutting edge have now proven to be effective. And there are discussions about using the Measure E site for a project which would help us reduce our climate emissions, which really is the emergency of the day. Climate was a priority back in 2009, but today way more people have woken up to the fact that this is really a dire situation, and it's so clear that we need to move on it in less than 10 years. So let's not race to lose this site, which could be so important to addressing our current climate emergency, and let's instead let the process work itself out to find a good use of this site that can be used for this really important goal. As others have stated, it's really not a great site. I mean, you go out there, it's really stinky. It's not really a pleasant site to be. So it's not so great of a park, but its adjacency to the water treatment plant makes it really key to handling our organic materials and addressing our climate goals. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Karen Holman, followed by Annie Yang.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, please.
Okay, super, thank you. Okay, we all want to do all we can to be the best environmental stewards possible. And there are many ways we can go about doing that. When this subject came up 11 years ago, there were a number of reasons not to pursue a project at this site, and a number of impacts were identified that haven't come up yet this evening. There are odors, noise, truck trips in and out of the site, visual impacts of the facility. None of those have come up yet this evening, and I suggest that they're probably all still impacts. But I'd like to address a few other things. Why would we want to invest millions of dollars, and it surely is, in an area subject to sea level rise, just as Eileen McLaughlin mentioned in her comments? When last considered, it was made clear that it isn't either economically or environmentally feasible for every city to have its own facility. Reference Phil Bobo's comments that it isn't where we do it, it's that we do it. This area, as staff has indicated, is a wildlife corridor. A corridor is critical. These corridors get challenged all the time, if not cut off. Wildlife corridors are critical for the survival of our wildlife, and our wildlife really lays the path of what we're going to be as human beings going forward, and if we're going to survive. I agree about landfill impacts. 20% of California's methane comes from landfills, but I suggest there are other ways, and I'll just mention one of them here, to reduce our landfill impacts that don't cost millions of dollars. One way is to ask the city council to require salvage of demolitions so that we aren't sending trucking thousands and thousands and thousands of tons of landfill to God knows where in the state, because it's getting further and further away that people will take, that cities will take and landfills will take, especially toxic landfill materials. Requires salvage of buildings instead of just 100% of a demolition that's required now. In other words, you have to demolish 100% of a building to require salvage. You know, it's not a sustainability thing, and we can't save every building, but we have a bad precedent here, in my opinion. We tear down perfectly good buildings just because it isn't what someone wants. Can't save every building, shouldn't save every building, but we could do a whole lot better to have a smaller environmental footprint if we just address our methane creation in that way. Leaving this land vulnerable to development is exactly why we have a dedicated parkland ordinance. Let's not prove once again the need for that ordinance. Thank you all.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Annie Yang, followed by Emily Renzel. And I don't know, Winter Dellenbach's hand was up. I don't know if she was added to the list or. So our last speaker will either be Emily or Winter. You're up, Annie.
Good evening, Chair Greenfield and Commissioners. My name is Annie Yang, and I'm a frequent visitor to Bixby Park and the Baylands. I'm here to ask you to recommend rededication of the 10 acres of Bixby Park at the Measure E site. Holding this land indefinitely for new promising technologies belies the longstanding promise that the landfill would be converted to open space, as well as the important compromise built into Measure E to secure its passage. The Measure E ballot measure sharply divided Palo Alto's environmental community. However, it acknowledged the long-term value of protecting this vital open space, and the final language promised that if an environmentally protected waste processing facility hadn't moved forward within 10 years, the land could be returned to its previous parkland designation. Well, it's been 10 years, and the city has had that time to explore the options. Time and resources spent investigating the anaerobic digester has meant delaying the previously planned aerobic digesters and elimination of the incinerator. It has meant destructive neglect of the natural buffer area shielding Bixby Park from the waste treatment plant, including the trees planted as a required mitigation. Removal of these 10 acres from open space planning has delayed the city's ability to, 1, provide complete trail connections around Bixby Park, 2, secure and enhance the wildlife corridor between the harbor and Rensselaer marshes, and 3, optimize for nature-based resilience to sea level rise. Delaying rededication would be inconsistent with public expectations and compound the opportunity caused by Measure E. Please don't double down on yet another emerging but unvetted technology at the expense of our natural resources. Thank you.
Thank you, Annie. And Emily Renzel, you're up next.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
This is Emily Renzel, 1056 Forest, and I appreciate all the work that staff and the commission have done to explore this issue. First of all, I would mention for those who talk about lands that were not park dedicated, the city in 1964 park dedicated all the publicly owned lands with 5 exceptions, which was the Municipal Services Center, the sewage treatment plant site, the Gang Road site, a little tiny PG&E substation, and the airport, I believe. All the rest of the publicly owned baylands were dedicated as parkland, including the Measure E site right up to the fence of the sewage treatment plant site. For those who say this is a lousy site because it's next to the sewage treatment plant, are they also saying that the entire Bixby Park is lousy? And if something were built to process sewage sludge on this site, it would put the rest of Bixby Park even closer to the sewage plant site. So I think there's some lack of logic in some of these arguments. Several people have mentioned the importance of this habitat corridor, and of course that's my particular interest. But I would point out that this isn't an only yes or no, up or down thing. The 2019 Regional Water Quality Control Plant Biosolids Facility Plan Update identified 7 locations on the sewage treatment plant site that could accommodate these kinds of technologies. So that was one thing. Also, the study of the, let me see if I can find it. Sorry, my notes here. Oh, newer technologies. In 2022, when the council approved a new sludge hauling contract, they said that newer technologies were studied, but these options were not considered the best option. So maybe there's been some changes in technology, but this issue has been studied. And at least in 2022, it was rejected. So I urge you to rededicate this site. Bob Winslow did provide you with a good photo from my bench that shows how effective the landscape screen on that site is. And if you remove all that landscaping, Bixby Park's view will be the sewage plant site. Please rededicate it. Thank you.
Thank you. And our final speaker will be Winter Dellenbach.
Thank you. Thank you for this valuable discussion. I appreciate it, as I'm sure we all do. Just for clarification, I want to clear up what seems to be a mistake. We do not truck our sludge to the Central Valley. We truck our sludge to San Jose. On September 12th, I watched a city council study session that was held about the proposed potable water reuse facility and the salt removal facility for recycled water. That's at the former Los Altos treatment plant. These are 2 different facilities that are adjacent to the Measure E acreage, or very close to the Measure E acreage. And concerns were expressed by, serious concerns were expressed by some city council members about investing in building infrastructure so close, so adjacent to the baylands in light of the very fast escalating sea level and consequent ground level rise. The council members discussed the news that the Thwaites Glacier, referred to as the Doomsday Glacier in popular news coverage, was quickly, very quickly escalating seawater rise with the potential of a rise of multiple feet. Information was not available at that particular meeting about this new information about sea level rise affecting our immediate area. But this is not fooling around. No matter what you think should be happening with Measure E land, it cannot be sloughed off. It cannot be ignored. This is a highly dicey location, whether it's the water processing infrastructure or technology about char and dealing with the sludge. To be investing in new infrastructure, and I've taken a look at the pictures in Redwood City. It's quite a lot of infrastructure. One would have to be very careful about it. And I don't know quite what the, I'm just really taken aback by this. And I think we should move forward with rededication and go ahead, because this is a lousy place to be putting this sort of thing. If this is a truly viable idea, economically feasible, and would give us a leg up, let's find a different place out of the Baylands for it. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you to all the members of the public who have shared their opinions with us tonight. We appreciate your input, and it's given the commission a lot to consider. I think it's important to consider our role as the Parks and Rec Commission this evening, as we consider our action this evening. There's a certain level of assessment of the technical merits of potential future plans and the concerns about sea level rise that are really beyond the scope of this commission. This is not a sustainability commission, and that is not our specific area of expertise. We have been tasked by City Council to provide a recommendation if they should consider rededicating this parcel as parkland. And I think what we bring our expertise to the table, but there will be other considerations that City Council will consider beyond our area of expertise. And I'm not suggesting that this is a matter of kicking the can down the road for City Council to consider issues. I'm speaking pragmatically in terms of what our commission's role is. We've heard passionate pleads from both sides of our community. We know this has been a decisive, this issue has sharply divided our community without question. And it's a division among community members that are more typically on the same side when there are matters of environmental discussion and sustainability coming forth. And so it's an uncomfortable position for the traditional allies in many cases to be on opposite sides. But it's our role this evening to consider if what we want to do in terms of fulfilling our role in taking an action this evening and making a recommendation to City Council as is part of our work plan for this year. Do you want to start with any questions of the council members or commission members for staff regarding the presentation and anything that we've heard from the public? Or do you want to? Would anyone care to speak first? Joy?
I want to thank everyone who has spoken today. I appreciate all the residents who have lived here for several years. Unfortunately, I was thousands of miles away from Palo Alto when the Measure E was passed. I have a background in environmental engineering, and I'm a passionate ambassador for sustainability. I'm also someone who loves data. So I'm wondering if a recent study has been done to kind of weigh the pros and cons. I've been to the Measure E site. It was serene. I went with my friend and her dog, and we had a nice walk talking about several things, and it was really nice. Yes, it smelled a little bit, but it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. My younger son went there for an excursion last week, and he enjoyed bird watching. One of the reasons why I joined the commission was to be able to, be a voice for the community. And I would like to, say that I appreciate the community's input in this, but I'm also standing for rededication of this park. But I would want to know if there's a recent study that's been done to kind of weigh the pros and cons of it being, rededicated or not, or still going ahead with future energy or compost facility as we plan to. So.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Oche. There isn't a recent study weighing pros and cons between compost versus parkland, but maybe Karen North, my colleague with Public Works, she's the assistant director, might have some information on the latest study that pertains to using it for a potential facility for composting. Do you have anything on that, Karen, that you could share?
Well, I appreciate everyone's Karen North, Assistant Public Works Director for Environmental Services Division, all the comments regarding the potential use for Measure E and the ballot initiative. That ballot initiative gave direction to look at different technologies, and it was very clear that it needed to combine sewage sludge and composting and food scraps. And at that point in time, the technology was it was basically a digester, and it was very expensive. And so council told us to basically hold off. And then we decided to do the sludge dewatering and haul out facility. And since that time, our staff has been currently working quickly to try and rebuild the entire liquid side of the wastewater treatment plant. And so we're basically moving through that. So we haven't actually been asked or directed to do an analysis on Measure E pros and cons, mostly due to staff constraints, just because we are rebuilding the entire liquid side of the wastewater treatment plant. The dewater and haul was to give us time while technologies changed in the future and evolved. So just to answer your question, we have not been able to do that study. And we're just trying to help answer the questions as they come.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Kleinhaus?
Thank you. I have a couple of questions. The study in 2019 did look at various alternatives, 7 alternatives for how to deal with the sludge, and 5 alternatives were considered, from what I saw, considered potential. This is not very long ago. There was mesophilic anaerobic digestion, and then one with drying, low temperature, alkaline thermal, pyrolysis and drying, and offsite hauling. And I was wondering if you can talk a little bit about the comparative emissions that each one of those 5 that moved forward would have. And also Herb Boroch mentioned earlier that pyrolysis loses a lot of the water that we are considering to recycle and also to provide to the water district. And I would like to know a little bit about that.
So those are some great questions, Johnny. I appreciate them. This is Karen North again. I actually was only notified literally yesterday that a lot of these questions are going to come up. So we shared the updated 2019 biosolids facility plan. The reason why, as I alluded to earlier, there are different analysis in there. At that point in time, we determined to go on the cheapest option. At the same time, there's the California short-lived climate pollutants rules and regulations. So we anticipate that probably the next time we go out for our biosolid, our sludge dewater and haul out contract, the cost will increase significantly. But as I was talking about earlier, we have currently put this one on, not on, it's on our many list. It hasn't gone off the list, but it's lower down on the project list at this point in time. I'm currently, if someone wants to, I'm looking it up, the analysis at this point in time and the different ones. I know that's part of our work plan with the updates on the sustainability climate action plan goals. We're currently as staff looking at our work plan that we're going to discuss with council in December. And that might be something that we evaluate what are the different options. So I don't have those answers specifically for you today, Shani.
So you don't have an answer about water use and emissions, which is what
we haven't done a thorough analysis on what that, when we updated the biosolids facility plan, and it was a high level update to a current plan that was done in 2014, just to do an analysis determining on costs at this point in time for when we were taking the dewatered sludge and whether or not we should continue to truck it. Half of our sludge goes to Fairfield Sassoon and it's put into a digester and then created into Class A biosolids. And then another part does go down to the Central Valley. And then our food scraps actually goes to a dry anaerobic digester and also gets energy out down in San Jose. So currently we are repurposing our solids processing from our facility and our food and yard trimmings. It's just not in Palo Alto. And if we needed to, it's on the list to reevaluate in the future of what we would be doing. And it's also technologies. So it's probably going to be discussed in council or we'll direct our staff to look at this in more analysis. And we'll have to see what will come off our work plan just to fit this into, or we'll need to add some resources to do that analysis for the more detailed. So Shani, just to answer your question, in 2019, when we did the analysis, or we did agreement with Valley Water, it was approximately half of our flow goes to Valley Water. We were not looking at holistically of future, how we would handle biosolids in the future as well. Because we weren't anticipating that they would actually execute the contract with Valley Water and they would start taking that water. So things have gotten a lot more complicated. So more analysis.
Any more questions, Shani?
No, that's okay.
Commissioner Brown?
I don't have any questions, just comments. So do you want me to reserve those for once everybody's asked their questions?
Vice Chair?
Yeah, thank you. I just have a quick question. Do we have a climate plan or concerns for the water treatment plant? And I'm assuming, I was looking at some of the lines, what's the elevation? What, about 0 to 5 on the flat part? Is that correct? 5 feet of elevation?
So regarding the current wastewater treatment plant, we anticipate that we will need to protect that facility for rising sea level. We are currently have done the vulnerability assessment, and then we're doing a climate action plan, which is due. We'll be working on it and getting comments sometime next year. We're also in tandem working with Valley Water and Army Corps of Engineers to try and figure out what is the levee alignment to protect our facility, including the entire city of Palo Alto. And that's something that we need to bring to our council as well. So it's currently we are raising up all critical infrastructure for flood protection. And we anticipate that we will also be building a levee to protect that facility.
Thank you.
Those determinations have not been made by council at this point in time, but we're heading in that direction.
Ellis?
Yeah. So a lot of information has been coming out our way here. One of the things I guess in the last meeting, we talked about the analysis, and I guess this is sort of part of that. And it sounds like all of the analysis just started in the last year or so. Can you kind of elaborate as to what the timeline for the planning? And I mean, is this something that's started maybe 2 years ago? If we got another 5 years or 6 years before anything starts to kind of shape out into becoming something?
Are you talking, so we are doing a lot of analysis. So let me just tease out and make sure I understand your question correctly. Are you talking about protecting of the sewage treatment plant, analysis on how we're going to handle our biosolids in the future? Which one specifically would you like more information
Yeah,
on?
I think I'm talking about all of the above.
Okay, that's what I kind of
It
figured.
will be a complete analysis looking at.
No,
there's some challenges as you've indicated as far as it relates to looking at sea level, flooding, and protection of wildlife and so forth.
Right. So we did the vulnerability assessment in the last year and a half. We are anticipating to work on the adaptation plan for climate protection for sea level rise in the next year. And then we'll need to do CEQA analysis on that. So that one will basically, how are we planning on addressing sea level rise, and what is our city council going to direct us to do in the future? In tandem, we also are working with our safer, we've worked in the past, since it's been years, potential levee alignments, and the Army Corps of Engineers on and Valley Water, because they're the ones that are in charge of flood protection. So we're also working with the larger agencies, and that can take a much longer time horizon for identifying the levee alignments and potential construction. So, but we do anticipate that our sewage treatment plant will need to be protected, just like all the sewage treatment plants around the perimeter of the Bay Area of the San Francisco Bay. All of them need to be protected. In regards to our solids, we are anticipating the timing may change based on council and our climate action plan goals for our solids analysis. That may end up be put into the 3-year work plan that we're discussing with council in December, but I won't know that at that point in time. My initial plan with my current staffing and rebuilding the sewage treatment plant was to probably look at the solids processing after the secondary treatment plant process is upgraded, and that's a 5-year project. So that is another thing we're going to council with in early December as well. So we've got a lot of competing priorities. So we're just trying to be nimble and tackle one thing at a time. Does that answer your questions?
I think so. But it sounds like, I mean, it's been something that has been ongoing, but probably in the last, it sounds like the last 2 years is where you've got the momentum going, but you still have a sort of a resource issue where you may or may not be able to do all of the analysis that you're planning to do.
Correct. I mean, we have competing demands on our time and a certain finite amount of resources. So we basically try to find an option for our biosolids and our hauled food waste and yard trimmings, and an interim solution. So they're both being handled off-site, not in Palo Alto. But if our council determines that we should be handling it on-site, then we need to reshuffle priorities so we can do more analysis on that.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Cribbs?
Yeah, could I just have one confirming question, and then I just want to make a comment. Can somebody tell me tell us where the sludge is going? Is it going to the Central Valley? Is it going to San Jose? Is it going someplace else? Where does it go
So
now?
the Commissioner Krebs, the current sludge, we have a hauling contract. A majority of it goes to Fairfield Sassoon, and it gets put through an anaerobic digester, so we get energy out of it, and then it's produced into a Class A liquid fertilizer that's injectable. And then about a third of it goes down to the Central Valley and is repurposed into Class A biosolids. None of our sludge goes to San Jose.
And isn't he going to Gilroy? Or what's going to Gilroy?
It may be a Gilroy facility, but I think it's actually farther than that. I think it's the Central Valley. Need to refresh my memory on that one.
Thank you.
Okay, I appreciate that. So last meeting, this seemed pretty simple. I went back and looked at the minutes, and it seemed like we were all very much in favor of rededicating this for parkland. And since then, with all of the letters and the great comments and community participation, I now have more questions than I have answers. And I don't think a lot of other people have too many answers either. So I want to say that I'm concerned that the ad hoc, and I'm not critical, just concerned that we didn't talk to some other people that were suggested that we talk to, like the Utilities Commission and the Committee for Sustainability that the city's running, planning and transportation. So maybe you did, and I just missed that.
Sure. So we did speak with the Public Works Department. We went on a tour of the site. We encouraged other commissioners to go on a tour of the site. We also met with the director of the Utilities Department and the chair of the Public Utilities.
Okay, so with the
Commission.
Director of Utilities Department,
We
not
met
just
with the
commission.
current
Okay.
director of utilities and the chair of the Utilities Commission.
Okay, that helps. So I'm wondering if, since our role is to protect parkland and try to keep as much as possible and gather as much as possible, that as a commission, that we should be in favor still of making this into parkland. Would it make any difference if the ad hoc or the commission went back and interviewed all the people that we just listed that maybe we didn't interview? Would that change the decision?
Let's finish up with questions before we get into comments.
Okay, go ahead and answer the question.
Okay, so I have some questions for staff, and then we'll get into comments. And before I do that, I want to do a quick time check here. We're after 9 o'clock. We have 2 more items on the agenda this evening. I wonder if we want to push the urban forestry annual report to next month, because we're probably going to be.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. We've got Peter Gollinger, the urban forester, on the meeting. I wonder if Peter can weigh in on that real quick. Peter?
The meeting will be the Tuesday before Thanksgiving.
Hello, Chair. Yes, I would be agreeable to that.
Does the commissioners think that's? Yes, he's already going to be attending the meeting for another item for the work at the water quality treatment plant, which involves replanting of trees for mitigation. Okay, so we may end up having a later meeting that evening, but we're gonna have a late meeting tonight as it is. Okay, so we'll make that deferment on the agenda. I have a number of questions for staff, and thank you to staff and commissioners for their answers and questions as we trying to figure out how to move forward on this. So Measure E site was originally dedicated as parkland in 1965, as I understand, and when it was used for landfill, it wasn't actually undedicated at that time. It was still parkland, and it would have reverted back to active parkland when the landfill site was closed, but Measure E was passed in 2011, which carved out 10 acres out of the site, which are no longer parkland. And so at that time, proposals went to staff to assess plans and projects for use of the site consistent with the guidelines in Measure E. What was is there a rough dollar amount in terms of staff time and consultant fees to analyze proposals at that time? Just any kind of a ballpark number to understand what happened then.
So I'm trying to dig back into the memory banks, since I was not the assistant director at that point in time. I know we had a consultant on board. I believe it was probably a couple $100,000. And I know that it did take considerable amount of staff time to look at the three. The measure was very specific that it needed to be all three: food scraps, yard trimmings, and biosolids for an energy compost facility. And so that's what the analysis was done on. And there's a staff report from 2014, 4744, if people want to look that up.
And actually, that's a good point that you bring up, Karen. So the Measure E requirement for use of the site is specifically that 3 types of composting must be done. Could you just slow that down a little bit and clarify that for us?
So the energy compost facility for food scraps, yard trimmings, and biosolids. So that was the measure. So when we were looking at it, it was looking at a variety of what would take all 3 to handle our organics in Palo Alto.
Okay, and so any future use of the site per the terms of Measure E would require treatment of all 3 types of materials.
Well, Lisa, but I would need to check in with our attorney to see if that is their interpretation.
And so part of the bigger picture question here is, there's a lot of uncertainties about the site. There's uncertainties about the project. There's or what project could be done at the site, and the site has been neglected, has been in a limbo state, as some speakers have commented, and so there is. If we're looking to rededicate it as parkland, that would require a vote of the public to change, but also to use the site for any purpose that did include addressing all 3 types of materials. That would also require a vote of the public. Is that correct?
I would need to check with our attorney's office if that is the correct interpretation.
And Darren, do you have any other information on that?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I did ask that of the city attorney's office. They had not made a decision. So I think it falls into the same category Karen's mentioning, that probably more research is needed.
Okay.
To form a legal opinion, which there is not yet.
Okay. And so there were three plans that were considered. There's staff time and consultant time spent on that. Then there were 3 more plans that were considered after that, something like that. And then ultimately in 2014, City Council advised staff to no longer pursue an active project on the site.
We weren't, I don't think it was that clear. It was more when we would go to councils for the solids hauling contract, then we would give an update, but we didn't definitively ask council that specific question. It was more just on staff resources and time. So that was an option for currently how we were going to handle the biosolids from our facility, but it wasn't necessarily our long-term decision. It was more of a stopgap measure while technologies changed and also when our staff resources freed up.
Okay. So when was the last time that staff reviewed a potential project for the Measure E site consistent with Measure E?
2014.
2014. So that was 8 years ago.
Correct.
Okay. So this site's been sitting in limbo for 8 years, waiting for something to happen. And roughly, how long would it take to approve a new plan for the site? It sounds like this is multiple years.
If we had the staff resources and it was a direction from council, we probably could get a new plan pulled together and analysis done in a year or two. But it would just depend on staff resources.
Okay, so 1 to 2 years plus.
Correct.
Okay, and there is a maintenance facility on the Measure E site. This is used for leachate and methane management of the former landfill, and there's an access road to the facility. And this was there prior to Measure E. Has the footprint or scope of this maintenance facility changed since 2011 when Measure E was passed?
Yes, because the landfill wasn't officially closed at that point in time. So it's a post landfill closure location. So that's just, we need to comply, even though it's Bixby Park, we need to maintain all of the underground leachate systems and also make sure that the cap, which is, we worked with the regulators to make sure that it was a soil cap versus a rigid cement cap. So our staff is constantly out there regrading, making sure there's no ponding and adding more dirt to the facility. So that footprint is slightly larger than 2011, but also the landfill is closed since then, and all of our post-closure facilities is located at that site.
I'm sorry, which footprint has increased, the footprint of the maintenance site or the footprint of
The maintenance from post-closure of the landfill.
Yeah, and as the landfill area encroached further into the.
No.
So that's maintained consistent.
Yeah, we're just maintaining what we need for our regulations for the post-closure of the landfill. So we do need to add some dirt when things sink in, make sure that we don't have ponding of water, and make sure we're maintaining our leachate system.
Okay, and so that's what you mean by the grading of the system.
Correct.
Adding the dirt to maintain the current footprint. And Darren, is there funding available to improve the landscaping of the site?
There is a CIP for the Bixby Park Improvement Project slated for, I believe, FY26, and it's got money allocated towards the parking lot, to landscaping, native planting, some irrigation to help the native planting establish, additional seating, things like that.
Okay, and are there other funds that could be used prior to FY26 for replanting of trees, or perhaps that would be mitigation for other areas that funding would come elsewhere?
Yeah, it depends on the degree that we're talking in terms of how much we're restoring and what we're planting. On a smaller scale, there's certainly existing funds to do incremental work rather than enormous amounts of restoration. But I think we'd have to have a more robust plan. We don't have anything right now.
Okay, and I guess back to Karin. So as far as the site, the Measure E site, in terms of being used for a future project, what other potential sites are there that the city could use? And is there land that could potentially, I know cost is obviously an issue, but some of the businesses along Embarcadero Way that are in the neighborhood, I know you're looking to expand your office space there, and that's an issue. Is that a potential to grow into as well as other sites in the city, the San Antonio Road, for example?
Well, as you know, we're very space limited on the sewage treatment plant site, the regional water quality control plant. We have done preliminary analysis on parcels for office space, just for handling the increased staff and these resource needs. But we haven't looked at it for process for increased treatment of the facility. The Los Altos treatment plant site is currently being looked at by Valley Water for a regional purification facility, but not for handling of yard trimmings and biosolids.
Okay, thank you. Do any commissioners have any further questions before we start making comments?
I just have a follow-up question. on the dirt or soil that is being deposited there. It seems like a lot of the soil was deposited right along the road that was put there. Is that just an impression, or is that because that is not really because of subsidence of the cap? It's just all along the road, along the Measure East site. And I was wondering when that soil was deposited there and why.
So I checked in with my landfill staff, and so the city capped and closed the landfill in 2015. There was a major grading project, and they've done minor grading and settlement repair work throughout the landfill. I'm not sure about specifically related to the Measure E site. I know that they've recently completed some settlement repair project in the area overlooking the Measure E site. And that's for positive draining so that the rainwater is not pooling. So they're trying to keep the contours as close as possible to the final grade at the time of a landfill closure. So they do change slightly over time. And so I'm not sure, Commissioner Kleinhaus, what extra soil you're talking about on the Measure E site, but I'd have to do more digging and analysis with my staff.
The flat areas used at least seem to be a lot wider than it is now. It's narrower, and I was wondering like what happened there. So I don't know if you can follow up. It doesn't have to be now.
You're talking about the roadway? Specifically, I'm trying to. Commissioner Kleinhaus, are you talking about the roadway going into the post landfill closure area?
Along the roadway, it seems like the hillside is closer to the roadway than it used to be.
Oh, I think it's always been like that, but I'll check with my staff because I know that they've had issues with subsidence and they've had to add dirt because it needs to be consistent with when we close the landfill.
Right.
But
Okay.
I'll confirm with them.
Thanks.
Vice Chair, you have a question?
Yeah, just quickly, in terms of timelines, when this was voted on in 2011, this is before Bixby Park had been filled and redone. Is that correct? The vote was before what the current Bixby Park is now. Do I have my timeline accurate?
Correct. It was passed before the landfill is officially closed and then turned into Bixby Park.
Karen, just to confirm, that's phase 3, right? Phase 1 and 2 were already open, so portion of Bixby hadn't been opened yet.
Thank you.
Thank you for
Karen.
clarifying.
Okay. So now as far as our direction for this evening, this is on the agenda as an action to vote on to consider voting for some sort of recommendation to City Council regarding rededicating this area as parkland. We have options in front of us. We can decide that we're not ready to make a vote and do further research on this. We can decide we can have a vote and we can make a recommendation and it can pass or not pass. And we can also, we have some range of the recommendation that we can make. We can recommend if the commission feels strongly as a body that we should rededicate this as parkland, we can make that recommendation. I think we could also make a recommendation for City Council to consider dedication of this area as parkland, understanding that there are going to be other factors to consider. And getting back to your question, would it help to take a break, to take some time to hear more about the plans? My thought on that is, I'm not sure how much it would help. I think there's a lot of uncertainties about what plans or what potentials there are. I think, and I don't think that this commission is the best group to make an assessment in terms of the viabilities of the various plans. There is certainly the consideration that the public voted on this, and at the time, there was a plan put forward to move forward with building some infrastructure on the site. There was also a timeout, there was a time consideration that after 10 years, City Council has the discretion to rededicate the area as parkland. And that's the question that City Council is asking us: is this something that they should consider? We're at 11 years now. So that's a consideration. I have some more comments, but Commissioner Brown, you haven't had an opportunity to speak.
Yeah, I'll try not to repeat a lot of the comments that have been made, but I do want to clarify that I don't think that our role is just to protect parkland at all costs. I think that our role is to advise on planning and policy issues related to parkland, and this falls under that category. I echo the comments that are made by many people here tonight about a more recent study and wanting more work done on this issue. I think it's premature to recommend action at this point, really one way or the other. And it does extend beyond our purview to City Council action to direct the public works staff and allocate budget for further study to revise that 2014 study. There's been a lot of talk about the technology changing since that 2014 study. But what's absent from that conversation is the state legislation. And I know Karin mentioned or alluded to SB 1383. And I brought that up when this item came before this commission last month. And I was concerned because that is a huge lift for every municipality in California, requiring every homeowner to subscribe to 3 bin collections, which is nothing new for Palo Alto, but for many jurisdictions, it is brand new, multifamily, commercial, and doing route checks. It also requires the purchase of compost to offset that increase in supply in the compost industry. So cities right now have to purchase compost and mulch to offset that impact. In theory, the legislation allowed for a renewable energy purchase, but that's not realistic right now. And there are fines associated. So that cost has to be factored into any analysis moving forward as well. We talked about trucking to different locations. And I know it's like 4 or 5 locations mentioned, but every other jurisdiction is also trying to deal with this increase in processing of compost. So that is also something that needs to be evaluated as part of this. It's not just a Palo Alto problem, it's a regional challenge, it's a statewide challenge. And so I think that's absent from this conversation. There were some comments made that Public Works and Utilities have no plans for the site, but again, they have not, this has not been prioritized or budgeted for, and that's something that the City Council would need to take action on, and Karin already clarified that. One of the benefits of converting it to parkland mentioned that it would be more eligible for grants, something that unfortunately we lack is staffing to manage grants or to pursue grants. So I think that analysis on the benefits of the parkland conversion is also equally, or if not more, incomplete than the updated study as well. If there are FEMA grants available for nature-based solutions, and I'm sure that could be evaluated, but I would like to see more specifics rather than just a blanket, we could get more grants. What does that mean? What does that mean in terms of dollars? Do we even have the staffing to pursue or manage those grants? So I don't know the result of restudying the issue. I do think that it warrants restudying the issue. Again, that's not something that's really the purview of this City Council or this commission. We would refer that or could refer that to City Council, which I would like to see done. And just in the current landscape of the regulatory requirements related to compost and organic waste, I just think it's irresponsible to make this recommendation that's proposed here before based on a 2014 study without looking at the technology, but also the legislation requirements. So those are my comments.
Thank you. And maybe this would be a good time to ask Councilmember Du Bois if he has any guidance to offer us as we're trying to find our way on this.
Well, you guys have an interesting item tonight. So I was on council when the anaerobic digester last came to council. I think there's only 2 of us left. and we only have a few months left. So there's really not been any recent policy decisions from council on Site E, to relate to you guys, my role as your liaison. Council did ask you guys in your 2022 priorities to look at parkland dedication. So I do think some update to council would be valuable. And listening to your discussion, I also think the point about scope is a good one. I think ultimately the council is going to have to make a decision based on all these different factors we're hearing. Parkland need, sustainability, climate change. And your focus is really Parks and Rec, you're not the Sustainability Commission. So, from that perspective, we are short on parkland acreage according to our comp plan. But I think whether you guys make a referral saying you think it should be dedicated, or you just make a referral saying you think the council needs to make a decision, I think either way would be good. It would get it in front of the council, and really, honestly, either way, I think council will appreciate your input, but they're likely to make their own decision, like I said, based on kind of all of these factors. So I don't know if that's helpful, but that's kind of my perspective, I think, on how the council will look at this.
No, I think that's very helpful and pragmatic guidance. I appreciate the input. Shani?
I wanted to make some comments. I asked questions, but I didn't make comments.
Please.
I think it is an area that is important to a lot of people. Some of them spoke here tonight. So people who say it's not important, parkland, there's better places, it's just sort of disrespectful to a lot of people who really care about this place. So I would say it's loved, it needs TLC, and it's important for sea level rise and so on. There are funds available under 30 by 30 now. They may not always be available for sea level rise solutions, for nature-based solutions. And I understand that people want to study more, but the Measure East site did have a potential sunset date, 10 years, and after 10 years, let's reevaluate, and that's what people voted on. They didn't vote on, let's just keep it open forever and keep it at limbo. And if there is a really good proposal in the future, they should consider it in a vote like they did last time. One of the things that we've been talking about is the studies that have been done. But there was a study that Emily Renzel sent us an email about, and that was done in 2019. So it's not very long ago. And that study looked at various options. And one of the things that it looked at is net energy consumed for each one of those, and greenhouse gas emissions for each one of the potential technologies and infrastructure that they looked at. And greenhouse gas emissions for some of those was really, really high, including some of the emerging technologies. So it's a little surprising that this is presenting as a better solution when it looks like the net energy consumed for some of these new technologies that people advocated for tonight, and greenhouse gas emissions are actually much higher than the greenhouse gas emissions, are almost 3 times more than just sending 2 trucks a day to the Central Valley. And there's also cost of building. There's impacts of building projects that is also contributing to climate change. I think we need to look, and if City Council is going to look at it, I hope they actually look at this study and maybe do a little more in-depth studies on that, and that they really look at what happens to water with these new technologies, because that was not evaluated. The one thing that was not evaluated is how much water are we going to retain out of the sludge that is sent out. And I think that's really critical because we need every drop. And so, for me, I would suggest that, rededicate it, don't keep it in limbo, And if other things come up, staff always studies new technologies. That's their job to look at new technologies. They should continue that when they have the bandwidth. But they're busy with all these recycling water projects, the sea level rise projects, all these other things. And meanwhile, we have 10 acres there that people would really like to see restored, sitting kind of as a hostage in a way. They're not being used except for people walking through. And there are a lot of people walking there. It's not unused and unloved. Anyway, that's my comments.
Thank you. Others care to comment?
Yeah, I'll tap in on what Commissioner Conhouse said. I mean, this is it's something we have to make a decision on. The technology, as I'm understanding, is something that is still fluid, changing. Could we be still out, 5 years, 10 years from now? So let's take advantage of, what we already have in hand, and that is that maybe the rededication of this as a parkland and whatever improvements we could make on that. It's just my take on it.
And your mic is on? Nope. Would anyone else like to speak? So I think it's reasonable for us to make a recommendation to City Council to look into this item. I think everyone on this panel would be in favor of a viable project on the site that's environmental and for climate change purposes. If it's consistent and if this site is the best location for it. I do agree with other commissioners that this is a very useful park. This is very useful land. It's not a park where you're going to fly a kite or kick a soccer ball. No one ever suggested it was. It's open space. It is an important corridor. It's also an important pathway. I also feel like we need to make a decision. And at what point in time do we decide that, yes, now is the time to rededicate it as parkland? How long do we wait? It's been 8 years since the area has been assessed for a viable project. Any future project is going to take years. As Nelsa stated, it's fluid technology here. If the project is not consistent with the terms of Measure E, it's going to have to go back to the voters to be approved anyway. I feel like if it's rededicated as parkland, then it's a more transparent process to the voters that this is parkland, and if you want to change, you want to remove it from parkland for a specific purpose, you have that option. But I do believe that it's reasonable that we should revert this back to parkland at this point in time. I think this is something a recommendation that can go to City Council. There will be other considerations for them to weigh further, as Councilmember Du Bois has indicated, and appropriately so. And as Councilmember Kleinhaus stated, it's not our purview to direct Public Works to do specific studies on things to answer questions we have. I think the decision in front of us is this viable? Is this important parkland that we should be considering and recommending to be returning to the active parkland of the city? And is this something that City Council should weigh in terms of the value of parkland versus other potential uses? So I would be in favor of making a recommendation to City Council to rededicate it as parkland.
I'll make that motion.
Okay, so would you like to phrase your motion?
Recommend to City Council to rededicate the Measure E site as parkland. Do I need to add anything to that? I mean, I haven't made any motions in my.
I think that's that's sufficient.
They'll consider
d-
other
d-
options and consider, I don't know, I don't necessarily need to tell them. They'll make their own decision, just like Councilmember Du Bois said.
Does staff have any further recommendation beyond that?
No, at the discretion of the commission, whatever you guys recommend.
I'll second the motion. Shawnee, would you like to speak further to the motion?
I spoke to that already in my comments. I'm not sure I have anything to add. I do think that keeping the land in limbo, looking for a magic bullet, which hasn't been found yet, is unjustifiable. I think we should move forward, rededicate it, and then eventually, if there is a magic bullet for all our streams, which is more climate friendly and cost effective than what we do now, then we should be again considering that. Since the Measure E passed, at the time we were still incinerating the sludge and sending trucks to Gilroy. That's not happening anymore. We solved both these problems by sending the yard trimmings and food to an energy facility in San Jose, 7 miles away, and retired the incinerators. So a lot of the incentives that people had at the time probably don't exist anymore. They've been solved. And we don't have that magic bullet, it just doesn't exist. So when technologies emerge, I trust staff to continue studying that. They always do. Thank you.
Thank you. As a seconder, I'll add that I do take into consideration the fact that the public has voted on this. And I'm certain that City Council will take this into consideration when they consider this action to rededicate the area as parkland. I do think it is important that there was a clause put in that after 10 years, the area can be considered for rededication. We're at 11 years now, and I think it's likely to be a number of additional years before a project is put forward. I don't think it's reasonable to go back to the voters to decide whether to convert this back to parkland. That's a significant expense. I think it's reasonable for City Council to weigh that. I think part of the consideration is whether or not there's a project that's going to be coming forward in a reasonable amount of time that will be consistent with the Measure E guidelines. If not, that any other project would require going back to the public for vote. And I think this area has been neglected for too long. I think it is a viable and a potentially vibrant area, and is important for a number of the reasons that have been mentioned. I think rededicating it as parkland, looking into restoring it, either using grants or CIP funding or mitigation funding, are all reasonable approaches. Do others have comment? Okay, if there's no comment, we'll go to a vote on this.
Chair Greenfield?
Yes. Could you restate the motion just so everyone's clear on what we're voting on?
Correct. The motion is to rededicate the Measure E site to parkland.
So we're recommending that City Council rededicate the Measure E, the Baylands Measure E site as parkland.
Correct.
Yes.
Thank you. Vice Chair Lemare.
I'm going to abstain.
Commissioner Brown.
No.
Commissioner Cribbs. Commissioner Freeman.
Yes.
Commissioner Kleinhaus.
Yes.
Commissioner Oche.
Yes, please.
Chair, that's 4 yes, 2 no, with 1 abstained.
Thank you. Thank you. So our next motion, our next order of business, which will be our last item for the evening, is the e-bike and electric conveyance policy. So open space and parks, electric bicycle and electric conveyances policy. This is a discussion item this evening. This is something that we hope to return back later this year as an action. There has seemed to have been some confusion among some members of the public in terms of what our agenda items function is. And this is a discussion item, which means that by definition, there is no action possible this evening. We're discussing the work of the ad hoc and staff and various outreach which has been undertaken, and we will return at a later date with an agendized action. We move forward with this, with the presentation, please.
Thank you, Chair. Again, Darren Anderson with Community Services Department. Let me start with a few definitions for e-bike and other electric powered mobility devices. California Vehicle Code defines an e-bike as having fully operable pedals, an electric motor of less than 750 watts, and other electric powered mobility devices include skateboards, scooters, one wheels, hoverboards, segways, and other similar devices that are powered by power assisted electric motors. When e-bikes were introduced, most municipalities and regional parks and open space agencies, including Palo Alto, had some regulation or code that categorized them as a motorized vehicle and prohibited them on trails, along with other vehicles like motorcycles. In 2016, the state of California adopted a new classification system that no longer categorized e-bikes as a motorized device. And the following descriptions for these three classes of e-bikes was also set by the state of California. I'm not going to read them, but I will mention that the California Vehicle Code prohibits the use of Class 3 e-bikes on recreational trails and paths unless the public agency with jurisdiction chooses to permit them. The code also allows the public agency to prohibit Class 1 and 2 e-bikes on trails within that jurisdiction as well. However, there's some new legislation, AB 1909, which takes effect on January 1st, that removes the prohibition on Class 3 e-bikes from trails and paths. Instead, local public agencies would be able to prohibit the operation of an e-bike of any class on equestrian trail, hiking, or recreational trails. So that's coming legislation in January 2023. So it was in response to that change by the state in 2016, along with the increase in use of e-bikes and these other devices we've talked about, and then the growing popularity of these e-bikes and their sales, that triggered the PRC to say we should put this on our work plan. Council agreed this should be something we should look at, and it was approved on our work plan. The ad hoc has met several times to discuss this, prepare this draft open space parks and electric bicycle, electric conveyances policy. And some of the factors that the ad hoc had identified as key to be thinking about and considering while developing the policy were the lists see before you on this slide: environmental and ecological impacts, safety, public access, et cetera. And these were all factored in and tried to balance them in the creation of this draft. Staff and the ad hoc met with transportation staff to get their feedback on their draft policy. And the transportation staff noted that they've observed a significant increase in the growth and use of e-bikes. They're increasingly seeing e-bikes in our school campuses. And they said the proposed restriction of Class 3 bikes from open space and park trails seemed appropriate to them. They highlighted the importance of ensuring that the draft policy allow for students to be able, who travel on park trails to get to schools, be able to use e-bikes. They noted that student use of e-bikes is happening now and will likely continue. And I should note that the draft policy, as it is currently, does allow Class 1 and 2 e-bikes in our urban parks, as well as other electric powered mobility devices. So those students could continue to access their schools through parks. Staff and the ad hoc also met with the vice chair and chair for the Pedestrian Bicycle Advisory Committee, that's Payback, to collect their feedback on the draft policy. And the chair and vice chair provided some helpful feedback. They noted that Payback is working on updating the bicycle and pedestrian transportation plan, which will address e-bikes. They recommended having this topic in front of the full Payback committee, not just themselves. And we have scheduled that for November 1st, where staff and members of the ad hoc will be presenting to them. They reiterated the importance of allowing for the use for students to use those park trails to get to schools on e-bikes. They recommended adding the term type in addition to class to describe different classes of e-bikes. And so that was added to the policy. They noted that bike parking is already really difficult in most parks and very limited, and that the draft policy should treat e-bike parking the same as it treats regular bikes. The ad hoc and staff agreed, and the draft policy was updated to note that e-bikes and regular bikes should be parked in designated parking locations where bike parking is available. And ultimately, I think it's the desire of the ad hoc, and I know staff feel the same way, that we'd like to be adding more bike parking as we go. It's something certainly to consider as we move on with this policy. And additionally, they recommend that the draft policy allow class 3 e-bikes in the same places that other vehicles like motorcycles are allowed. Originally, we had said that it shouldn't be an open space at all. And then it was very clear that, yes, if you're going to allow a motorcycle into Foothills Park on the main road, why would you preclude a class 3 e-bike? It doesn't make sense. So we changed the draft to reflect that they're restricted from trails, but not the paved roads. And lastly, the vice chair and chair of Payback had recommended that the draft policy be changed to allow e-bikes access on the unpaved trails at the Baylands Nature Preserve. And while they agreed that it would be inappropriate to have them in Foothills Nature Preserve and Pearson and Raspadero Preserve, they noted the Baylands should be treated differently and should allow e-bikes on paved and unpaved trails. They noted that the Bay Trail, which includes paved and unpaved portions of the Baylands, is often used by people commuting to work and should be accessible to people with e-bikes. Let me show you really quickly on this trail map for the Baylands. On this map, and I know it's a little challenging to see it all, but the dark white or solid white lines are the paved portions, and the dashed or dotted white lines are the unpaved portions. And I'll skip in a second to another map that shows the Bay Trail in particular. But as you cross Friendship Bridge, if you can see my cursor over here by San Francisco Creek, there's a paved bike path that brings you down to Gang Road and the Baylands Athletic Center. You can cross the Baylands Athletic Center and come down the roadway to the rest of the Baylands if you like, or come along East Bay Shore Road and follow that paved bike path all the way down to Adobe Creek, where you can take, again, a paved bike path that would adjoin with our neighboring agency, Shoreline Park in the city of Mountain View. And what the chair and vice chair for Payback were advocating, probably in addition to these other unpaved trails, that is along SF Creek to the mouth of the creek, going towards the Nature Center, but more particularly going all the way around Adobe Creek Loop Trail, this route here. And I'll switch maps and show you different perspective. This is a map of the Bay Trail, and you can see at the very top, we're at Cooley Landing and the Ravenswood Preserve, which is operated by Mid-Peninsula Regional Open Space District. And it comes down and again crosses the creek into Palo Alto. And you can see the light green is the unpaved portion, but also Bay Trail. And it goes up to the Lucy Evans Nature Center, and again, all the way around the Adobe Loop Trail. However, the dark green follows that route I mentioned before, all the way to East Bay Shore, and then connecting up with City of Mountain View Shoreline Park.
Excuse me, Darren, could you clarify and just go back to that slide? So both the dark green and the light green are the Bay Trail?
That's correct.
Okay. That's important to understand.
Excuse me. I should note also, some observations on staff and how the ad hoc came to consider that recommendation, but ultimately not incorporated into the draft that you see before you. Some of that information is that open space staff has observed that most of the bicycle commuting appears to occur on that paved section. That's the dark green on the map you see before you. Although we have not done a survey, any formal surveys on that, that's just anecdotal. The ad hoc had noted that access to the unpaved sections of the Baylands Trail is primarily recreational as opposed to being commute or transportation oriented. And that you can still travel from the Friendship Bridge all the way to Shoreline Park on a paved trail. In addition, an additional concern was that allowing e-bikes on the unpaved portions of the Baylands has the potential to encourage increased fast-moving commuter cycling in sensitive areas of the Baylands. The ad hoc's concerned that it could lead to e-bikes going onto the unpaved trails on top of Bixby Park. And it's desirable to be consistent with our neighboring agencies. Again, Mid-Peninsula Regional Open Space to our north, with Ravenswood Preserve and City of Mountain View's Shoreline Park to our south. City of Mountain View does allow e-bikes on their parks. And I guess I would note that it happens to be that their Bay Trail is almost completely paved within Shoreline Park. So it would be consistent with what we're proposing in our policy, which is paved trails only for the Baylands. And the same is true for the Mid-Peninsula Regional Open Space District. They allow Class 1 and Class 2 e-bikes on their improved trails at Ravenswood Open Space Preserve. Locally, there's mixed support for e-bike use with varying restrictions. Many restrictions have not been updated since the California Vehicle Code in 2016. One of the local agencies that's done a significant amount of work in this area and research and study on the e-bike policy is Mid-Penn, the Regional Open Space District. Part of their analysis included various surveys and studies. They did a one-year pilot on Class 1, Class 2 on paved multi-use trails within Rancho San Antonio and Ravenswood. I did want to point out an error in my staff report. I had mistakenly listed the date of the Mid-Penn Open Space District Board as being July 10th. That was incorrect. It was actually June 29th. And at that meeting, the directors approved the following, what you see on the screen before you. That was to allow Class 1 and 2 e-bikes access on those limited improved trails at Ravenswood, allow 1 and 2 e-bikes on the limited improved trails that are currently allowed in Rancho San Antonio, and to affirm the prohibition of e-bikes on district trails except for those specifically referenced above. So getting to our draft policy, how we got to that, the ad hoc and staff attempted to create a draft policy that's easily understood, compatible with our regional partners and neighbors, consistent with our sustainability goals, and then strike that balance between accessibility and environmental protection and stewardship. The policy is broken into 3 sections, one specific to open space, one specific to parks, and one that pertains to both parks and open space. Let's talk about the open space policy. So this allows Class 1 and 2 e-bikes on paved roads and trails and prohibiting them elsewhere, including unpaved roads and trails. Class 3 e-bikes would not be allowed on any trails in our open space preserves. Class 1 and 2 e-bikes are allowed for city staff and open space parks for either maintenance or law enforcement purposes. This is consistent with another Palo Alto Municipal Code 2204150F that has a similar allowance. Other electric powered mobility devices are allowed on paved roads and trails at the Baylands and prohibited in the other open space preserves. Again, that's Pearson and Rastradero, Foothills, and Esther Clark.
And Darren, before you move forward, I just want to clarify something that I was caught up on for quite a while. I just want to point it out to commissioners. When we say trail, this is equivalent to path. So when a paved trail is any kind of a paved walkway, for example, a paved walkway through a park, that is being referred to as a trail here. An unpaved trail, for example, through Mitchell Park, where there's the decomposed granite pathways, those are unpaved trails. So just bear in mind when we say trails, that in many cases might be what you think of as a path. And we talked about the the language to use in trails is being used for better compatibility with other documents.
Point. Thank you, Chair. The parks policy, class 1 and 2 e-bikes would be allowed on paved and unpaved trails in parks and prohibited elsewhere in areas like turf, sports courts, playgrounds, and landscaped areas. Class 3 e-bikes would not be allowed on parks, and other electric powered mobility devices are allowed on paved and unpaved trails and parks and prohibited elsewhere. So the areas that pertain to both open space and parks, one would be the speed limit. We have an existing regulation R120 that applies to bicycles. This would extend to e-bikes and these other electric powered mobility devices that would cap it at 15 miles per hour with the additional information that you see below in terms of required to slow to 5 miles per hour when passing others, et cetera. When not in use, e-bikes and other electric powered mobility devices should be parked in designated parking areas when available and may not be left unattended on trails, vegetation, landscaped areas, and vehicle parking areas, and are not allowed to interfere with access to open space, park, trail, turf, playground, sports, etc. And these same guidelines will apply to regular bikes. A note on Americans with Disabilities Act, or ADA. This overlays all city policies and is specific to each individual person who may need an adjustment of city policy or regulation. People may contact CSD staff to make an ADA access request pertaining to this policy. I should note this is a little different than some agencies handle, in particular Mid-Penn Regional Open Space District. They had one specific to ADA that applied broadly and spelled out all the details. In working with our city attorney's office, they guided us to this statement where, as opposed to preconceiving what would be allowed, it'll be determined on each individual case. So if someone would say, I would like to do X, and it's evaluated on its own merits and situation. And lastly, the next steps I had mentioned earlier, November 1st, we will present to the Pedestrian and Bicycle Advisory Committee, collect their feedback. And then at some point, I believe December 13th, we'll target an action item with this commission. And Chair, that concludes the staff presentation. I should note, Chair, I do have the definitions if we want them on additional slides, if you want to look at them.
Thank you. And those were provided in the packet. So. Commissioners can refer to them if they'd like. I know we have a couple members of the public with their hands raised to speak. You'll get your opportunity in a moment. If anybody else would like to speak, put your hands up, and more going up. Thank you. Before we do that, do any commissioners have any clarifying questions regarding the staff report? Vice Chair.
Yes. In regards to the bikes at the Baylands, is that just class 1 and 2, or is that class 3 as well that are allowed on those trails?
Yeah, good question. And I know this is long and convoluted. I tried to walk through it. I know that it's easy to get these confused. What we're proposing is class 1 and 2 allowed on paved roads and paved trails and prohibited elsewhere. And class 3 would not be allowed at all.
And would class 3 be allowed on the paved bike path that connects Palo Alto to Mountain View?
No,
Okay.
not on any of the trails,
Not
paved or
anything.
unpaved.
Okay, great.
It would be on the road like a motorcycle could.
Right.
Any other clarifying questions?
Yeah, just one of the challenges is trying to differentiate between the different classes. It's very difficult to kind of eyeball and know which bikes are class 1, class 2, or class 3. And I think that's going to get worse over time because the manufacturers and designers are probably looking at ways that they can make their bikes to become more the traditional bikes. So those are some of the challenges.
And in fact, some bikes can be switched between class 1, class 2, and class 3. So simply looking at the bike doesn't tell you what class it is.
Yeah.
So it's complicated, and there is a 15-mile-an-hour speed limit on all trails, but it's basically self-enforcement. We're trying to appeal to the community to understand that the basic speed limit, even though these devices can go 22 miles an hour with assistance.
I do have one question to Darren on the 15 mile per hour speed. There's no way to really enforce that. How do the rangers handle that now, I guess, with the regular bikes?
Yeah, that's a good question. I should note we had one of our rangers, the supervising ranger at the Baylands, join the ad hoc team and me to work on this and discuss it. And one of her points was exactly that. Unlike some agencies like Mid-Peninsula, some of those rangers do have the equipment necessary to enforce speed limits. They have radar guns and they are trained and utilize those. Our staff is not, and nor have they ever. So what do we do when we have speeding bikes? Oftentimes the ranger will talk to them and it's usually the gross succession of 15. So we don't know if it's 15 or 16, right? So if they're just blowing by someone in a hazardous way, the ranger may choose to stop them and say, seems like you're speeding. We've never issued a citation for that in the Baylands that I'm ever aware of. And it's not something they really have the capacity to do in terms of the number of staff to do on a regular basis. It's really pretty infrequent. So by and large, it's the request to people and hopefully they honor that.
Okay, thank you. Let's go to our members of the public, and you'll have 3 minutes to speak. And first will be Arthur Lieberman, followed by Paul Goldstein.
Good evening, commissioners. My name is Art Lieberman. I was invited to the meeting on October 3rd to discuss a draft of the e-bike policies with Mr. Anderson and the ad hoc committee. At that meeting, I argued that folks riding class 1 and 2 e-bikes should be allowed to ride on unpaved trails in the Bayland open space where bicycles are currently allowed. I argued that the unpaved trails in the Baylands are different from the unpaved trails in other open space preserves. However, the ad hoc voted against this provision as noted in the draft guidelines. I hope you will reverse this for several reasons. First, the Mid-Peninsula Open Space District, upon which you rely heavily for your guidelines, allows e-bikes on the same kind of unpaved, improved trails that are in the Baylands. The map of the Baylands describes the trails as built with gravel and decomposed granite. The Mid-Peninsula District says that an improved, unpaved trail is one that is neither paved nor dirt, but has a hard packed base rock surface. Sounds essentially the same to me. Thus, by allowing e-bikes in the Baylands, you would be following the Mid-Peninsula open space guidelines for the nearby Ravenswood Preserve. I sent in a note to the commission that I hope clarifies this issue. Second, I don't think that environmental damage that e-bikes can do on these wide, tough trails would be any different from what's done currently by cyclists. This morning, while walking on the Adobe Loop Trail, I was passed by a water district van, and I was passed by several city trucks on similar trails in Bixby Park. As a payback colleague said to me, these trails are actually roads. Third, the draft guidelines are just bad policy. There are already folks with e-bikes riding on the Bayland trails. I saw 2 this morning. One was a woman who was riding an e-bike in order to keep up with 2 men on road bikes. So if you ban e-bikes, you will be creating a guideline that some women will consider sexist and discriminatory. Even more important, the guidelines will likely be ignored. It is terrible policy to create rules that many feel do not make sense, and so they will likely ignore them. Fourth, the Baylands are adjacent to Bixby Park. There's a sign that marks the boundary, but the trails are identical. It makes no logical sense to say that it's okay to ride e-bikes in one place and not the other. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Paul Goldstein, followed by Cedric.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. My name is Paul Goldstein. I am a 50-year resident of Palo Alto and a longtime member of the Palo Alto Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee. I often walk and hike in Foothills Park and in the Baylands. I am here to urge you to allow Class 1 e-bikes on the improved trails in the Baylands. I want to second everything that Art mentioned. Although I recognize that both Foothills Nature Preserve and the Baylands are nature preserves, and I understand your desire to make the rules in our nature preserves similar, The trails in each are qualitatively different. Bikes are currently allowed on the Bayland trails, and conflict with pedestrians and wildlife is minimal. Many older bicyclists are now using e-bikes in order to keep up with younger bicyclists. These devices are essentially similar to pedal bicycles. As mentioned in your staff report, the state of California no longer classifies these as motorized devices. The trails in the Baylands, although not paved, are essentially improved roads. Bikes are allowed now, and Class 1 e-bikes should also be allowed. Thank you.
Thank you, Cedric, followed by our last speaker, Karen Holman.
Yeah, I mean, I concur with everything that Arthur and Paul spoke, mentioned. I think the e-bikes and the pedal assisted bikes should be allowed anywhere where a regular bike is permitted. The city is actively trying to encourage people to get out of their cars and get onto their bikes, and to get onto regular bikes or to get onto electric bikes. Whatever it takes to stop driving around with all the weight and the metal and the power required to move an entire car. So as part of our climate goals to get people out of their cars and onto bikes or other devices, including these electric mobility devices. And there's people that, as was mentioned, elderly people or people with other health conditions for whom a non, just a regular bike without a motor is not really feasible for them, or it's increasingly difficult for them to operate. I think more important is these considerations of speed. Is someone zooming by at, 28 miles an hour or 20 miles an hour? Well, that's, that can be unsafe for the pedestrians or even a regular cyclist. But if you are enforcing speed limits that are reasonable and appropriate to the conditions of the path, I think that is a more appropriate and effective way to address these things. I myself am a lifetime cyclist, a lifetime resident of Palo Alto. I use my bicycle as my primary means of getting around town, and I've resisted getting an e-bike because, frankly, I need the exercise. But there's some places that, I recently rode up to Los Altos, and Google Maps directed me through Arrastradero, and going up some of those hills, I was like, oh, geez, this is where I wouldn't mind having a little bit of electric assistance to get up these hills. It's not to necessarily go speeding like a maniac, but just to get out there and enjoy space and enjoy our parks in a way that's respectful of all users. So I don't think you should be limiting who can ride just because it's electrically powered. Thank you.
Thank you. And our final speaker, Karen Holman.
Hi, good evening. I didn't realize this was on your agenda, so I hadn't really have any comments planned. I currently serve on the board of Mid-Peninsula Regional Open Space District, which was often referenced in staff presentation. And I just want to make a few comments here. Mid-Pen had long discussion, probably hundreds of commenters on whether to allow e-bikes or not. And the commenters are pretty much, at least at our last meeting, pretty much split down the middle. We did a one-year trial in the Baylands and, not in the Baylands, in Ravenswood, and also in one very small portion of Rancho San Antonio. So what we did allow, when I think staff got it right, what we did allow was the Bay Trail that goes through Ravenswood because it's a commute route. So we allowed e-bikes there, only class 1 and 2. nowhere class 3. That's correct with staff. And in Rancho San Antonio, it's only a couple of paved trails and one unpaved trail that's very limited and very short. No place else in Rancho San Antonio are e-bikes allowed on unpaved trails. One of the issues that came up and over and over again is conflict. Even though bikes are allowed on some of these trails where we did not allow e-bikes, there's still the issue about conflict. And there's still the issue also that was persuasive to us. It was one person was absent. It was I think it was a 4-1 or 5-1 vote, something like that, to not allow e-bikes. One of the issues was enforcement, and that's come up here too. So like e-bikes can go 20, your chair said 22. I'm familiar with 20 miles an hour. How do you enforce that? It's not likely that it will be enforced. I really don't think they belong in our urban parks. I just can't allow, can't imagine being in some of our urban parks and having an e-bike zooming up behind me, and they're quiet too. So there are ADA allowances, as was mentioned in the staff report. So people who have no other way to be able to be on a bike in the parks or in the Baylands, that's okay. E-bikes are known to cause trail damage. So there's the maintenance cost of it too. I really don't think they ought to be allowed on all the unpaved trails in the Baylands. I can't even imagine that, again, because of trail damage. And I'm going to stop there. I'll hang around here if you have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes our members of the public speaking. Thank you for sticking with us this evening to have your important opinion shared with us. We appreciate that. Who would like to start with comments or questions? Shani, you're looking the most maybe-ish.
I thought that this policy was really difficult, and I really appreciate the ad hoc partners in how thoughtful they were and how carefully considered every little inch of this well, it's not that long, but this document, looking at definitions, looking at balancing the needs of people to recreate and commute and the needs of the environment to be protected and the various technologies and the regulation. It was really pretty complex, and I'm glad we have something to bring to everybody else, and especially Nellis. Thank you.
Thank you. I guess it would be best to start off with the comments from the ad hoc. Nellis, do you want to go next?
Sure. Like Commissioner Kleinhoff said, it was a challenge. This is it's an area I think that we definitely want to stay ahead of. We want to be in the seat of being proactive versus reactive, trying to catch up. It's kind of like pickleball. It's fast growing, and it's bringing in people from all demographics and age groups. So, as people get older, you might not be able to, enjoy some of the scenery that we have as far as being able to bike up hills with a regular bike and so forth. Whereas an e-bike gives you a little bit more flexibility to do that. So I think we're going to find more and more people out willing to take advantage of the outside, and also, even though the bikes are assisted, it still you still have to give some effort and there's some exercise that does take place there. So this is something we've been working on. I think it's going to be evolving technology. I think the manufacturers and the designers of bikes are out there constantly looking at ways because they see the benefit of it being very profitable. So we want to stay ahead of it, and I think, at the same time, provide realistic regulations that don't prevent people from being able to take advantage of this. At the same time, there's a lot, I think we're also seeing a lot of different, besides e-bikes, there's a lot of type transportation that's out there. And we try to address things like the skateboards and some of the others devices that are out there. So there was a lot of work put into this. I think we were able to look at what some of the other agencies are doing, and some of our neighbors, and trying to mirror that as much as we can, because one of the things we don't want to hear is people saying, well, why are they doing this in Menlo Park or in Marin and other places? But at the same time, we want to be able to be good stewards of how the approach that we take. So I just wanted to, point, it's one of those that we want to stay on top of.
Thank you. Yes, this certainly was a challenging project, and we're working to put together an initial policy, and it's going to be an evolving policy, certainly as time goes on. There are a number of concerns which I think Darren has articulated, but I'll emphasize some of them a little bit further. Compatibility with bike transportation corridors and with safe routes to school was an important consideration. And on the surface, on a certain level, it doesn't make sense to me why a class 2 bicycle would be electric bicycle would be allowed on a park path or trail. This is, to me, this is equivalent to a moped. In that someone can ride this device without pedaling, and that feels like a moped and doesn't feel right. But at the same time, to maintain compatibility with neighboring jurisdictions, and this is what people are using as basic transportation to get to school right now. That's overriding what would seem to be a sensibility. We want to encourage ridership. We want to encourage getting people out of cars, and at the same time, we need to balance safety concerns. Parking concerns are an issue both for e-bikes and for all of the other electric conveyances that aren't properly supported in terms of parking options. One area of the policy that we know needs more work is regarding class 3 access to parking lots. So in that, right now, our policy states that class 3 bikes would not be permitted in parks at all, and this isn't accurate. They should be permitted in the same places where motorized vehicles are permitted. The parking question for class 3 e-bikes becomes even more complicated, in that they not only would they be required to have access to parking lots, we want them to access the bike parking lots, which aren't part of the car parking lots typically. So we need to figure out how to craft language which will support that. Speed is a concern, and enforcement of 15 miles an hour is a major concern, as Karen Holman mentioned, and as Darren mentioned. And that was our overriding reason for deciding not to permit e-bikes on the unpaved portions of the Baylands area. That's one reason. The other reason is that the Baylands is right next to Bixby Park, and bicycles are allowed at Bixby Park, and it makes even more sense to not permit e-bikes on the trails at Bixby Park, where you have the slopes going down, especially. So given that for compatibility of it, and ease of understandability for riders, we opted to not include permitting e-bikes on the paths. It seemed difficult for people to understand that you could potentially go on the Adobe Creek Loop Trail unpaved path, but not on the unpaved paths at Bixby Park. There was quite a comment made by one of the speakers that the mid-pan policy allows e-bikes on the very trails that we're suggesting they're not going to be permitted on. And Darren, you can correct me, and perhaps if necessary, we could ask Karen Holman to confirm. But as Karen mentioned, e-bikes are only permitted on one very short unpaved trail at Rancho San Antonio, and for most unpaved trails throughout the Mid-Penn network, e-bikes are not permitted. And so we were looking to maintain consistency with the Mid-Penn policy. Darren, were you able to confirm that?
I think that's correct.
Karen, are you available to comment on that?
Yes, that's accurate. Mid-Penn does not allow e-bikes on any paved or unpaved trails in any preserve other than Ravenswood and the very limited ones in Rancho that have been mentioned. Thanks for the question.
Thank you. And getting back to the bike transportation corridor, we wanted to make absolutely sure that anybody who's commuting along the Bay Trail on an e-bike would have access. And the most expedient path for commuting along the Bay Trail through Palo Alto is the paved trail, which is open to e-bikes. I'll stop there and give other commissioners an opportunity to comment, if they so choose to do. Vice Chair.
Yeah, I'd appreciate all the work that has gone into this. Just a couple, and I also appreciate the clarification on the class 1 and 2 and kids commuting to school and what they're doing with that, because I also view a class 2 bicycle as a little bit different than a class 1. I feel like it stands on its own because it can go on its own without being pedaled. But it is, as Commissioner Freeman mentioned, as these bikes start looking more and more just like regular bicycles, it is so difficult to tell them apart. I think there's some difficulty. I do think we need to think about class 1 bicycles. And what I mean by that is it's a bicycle that is becoming, and speakers alluded to it and commented on it, it's becoming more and more used by riders who, especially older riders who may not be able to pedal as far anymore or get to where they want to go. And it's become a big help to allow mobility and access. And so I think really thinking about class 1 bicycles as a separate entity is something to consider. But I do appreciate everything that all the work that you have put into this as an ad hoc.
Darren, would you like to share any of the comments from the Transportation Department regarding separating class 1 from class 2 that you may recall? I think that's a discussion that we had related to the safe routes area and explain why we didn't end up with a separate class 1 policy and why class 1 and class 2 were grouped into class 1.
Forgive me, Chair, the nature of that conversation escapes me in terms of.
Yeah, I kind of remember we did talk, I think, early on about the separation. And I think the challenge comes into play as how do you know which is which? And so it becomes a lot harder to try and, I think it puts a lot more challenge on the rangers or others to try and, there's no distinctive difference. So, I agree that it would be nice to be able to separate them, but I'm not sure how you could do so.
Well, if someone's not pedaling and they're zipping along, it's not class 1. And that is kind of the fundamental concern about this. If someone isn't pedaling, then they're by definition inherently a little bit less in control. And if the device is capable of going to 22 miles an hour and we can't reliably enforce that, then it's a concern. Would others like to comment? So we are looking for any input you may have to help us further craft our draft policy to bring back to the commission for action and recommendation city council. The next step, as Darren has articulated, is to go to hear from Payback a week from today. And then likely back to the Parks Commission in December as an action. And you're welcome to attend the Payback meeting. Darren, can you make sure that the commissioners have information on that? Although that is a notice meeting, so it is okay to speak, I guess. Joy or Mandy, any comments or feedback? Darren, do you have any further key feedback or comments?
Just that I think it would be valuable to hear from the rest of the commission, in particular on that element of the Baylands unpaved trails. Thoughts, feedback on that would be particularly helpful. Do the other parts sound right to you? Are we on track? Feedback would be really beneficial now, especially if you've got more research that you'd like staff to do. Knowing that now as opposed to the next time we talk would be really helpful.
Yeah, I do have one additional. I don't recall if we actually, we talked about how quiet these bikes are when they're on the trail or the path. I can't remember if we talked about the reduction of speed when a pedestrian is, in that vicinity. And that might, I don't know how, basically making that a requirement that if you are, if you're approaching a family or a pedestrian, to reduce the speed down to 5 miles an hour or whatever it might be, which might address any concerns about not hearing a bike approach. I thought we had put that in somewhere, but maybe.
Well, under the R120, we've got something that says bicyclists, e-bike, and other powered mobility devices and equestrians are required to slow to 5 miles per hour when passing others or approaching blind turns. Does that address what you're hinting at?
Yeah.
Okay.
And another comment I remember hearing from that was shared with Payback is that the e-bikes are heavier than regular bikes, and so they take longer to slow down. And further to what Darren said, to the commissioners who are not on the ad hoc, it would be really helpful to hear now what your thoughts are of where we're headed on the access to the Adobe Creek Loop Trail, which is the unpaved trail through the Baylands. It was the lighter green trail, which is part of the Bay Trail. And maybe Darren, you could put that image back up.
My only comment in regards to the Baylands and the bikes, it's probably not possible, but I would be in favor of allowing class 1 at the same place that regular bicycles are allowed. Would be my only feedback. But again, I don't know. Obviously, it's problematic, as you guys were saying, is can you tell what's a class 1? And does that just allow license for any e-bike? But my preference would be to be able to allow people, and I guess they might just do it anyway, but to allow class 1 where the regular bicycles are allowed around the Baylands.
Commissioner Cribbs.
Yeah, I would just add, I would agree with that. I'd like to see sort of why and if the class 1 could go on the unpaved trails.
And can I just ask a clarifying question? Just at the Baylands?
Just at the
Got it.
Baylands,
Thank you.
no other place.
And you're okay with continuing to allow class 1 and class 2 on the paved and unpaved park trail, public park trails? Nellis?
I just want to throw one out there. And on the class 1, would it be possible, let's say if there were people that wanted to ride their bikes in the Baylands and there are class 1s, could we maybe entertain a sticker or something where it could be obvious to the ranger or someone else that is a class 1 bike? So it separates it separates us from, class 2 to class 3, I guess.
Yeah, good question. My hunch is probably not. I don't think the Rangers would be able to manage that. And I think it might end up being really difficult because not everyone would have the sticker, but I'm glad to discuss it with them. I'll bring them to our next meeting when we talk about that. But my hunch is that would be challenging.
Like the vehicle access thing.
Johnny?
So there are a lot of different types of mobility things. There's people zooming on all sorts of things out there. A few days ago at the Baylands, I saw one of those one wheel, two wheel, all kinds of. So once you start deciding which ones are allowed and which ones are not, I think it gets really complicated. And some of them you can't tell apart, and they keep coming up with new ones. And so we're trying to make something more general that is easier for the rangers to discern or to figure out what to do. Anyway, just saying.
Another thing is the reason for distinction between class 1 and 2 being allowed at the Baylands open space area and not allowed at Foothills Nature Preserve or Rastadero or Esther Clark Park is we want to make sure that the e-bikes can be used to get to the preserves. And it's quite practical and reasonable to ride an e-bike to the Baylands. It's not really practical so practical to ride an e-bike to Foothills Park. It's not generally accessible to most people. And similarly at Rastadero Preserve, there's no parking lot per se, or parking areas like there are, and paved roads going through the preserve as there are at the Baylands. And there is no road at Esther Clark Park. And that's why we had a different distinction for Baylands versus the other open space preserves. And Joy, Mandy, any comments as far as your thoughts on?
Thank you, Chair.
And Darren, thank you for posting the picture there.
Yeah, I'm just curious to know if Karen is still on the call to find out what the results of the trial period they had when they did the mid-pen one, what the trial period, what were their findings, and to see if it's something we could customize for ourselves as well, just like the draft policy says. I'm also curious to know what the main concerns are. Is it just the speed, or what else would be a major challenge for e-bikes, let's say?
Okay, so first off is the question of the
findings.
The findings from mid-pen and
the trial period.
And they had quite extensive findings. And it would be difficult to summarize quickly. And I think there is a link to that in the report, Darren. Do you want to comment briefly on that, or ask Karen to comment?
Yeah, if Karen Holman is available, I think that would be best. Whatever I say about it's going to be inherently shortchanging it because it's so robust and I don't have all the information handy. I cherry picked a few that I thought were somewhat helpful, but it doesn't paint the full picture and it may be misleading.
And I'm afraid at this hour, and that being a lot of water has gone under the bridge since then, I'm not sure I'm going to do it justice either. The trial was in the two areas. It was on the paved commute part through Ravenswood, and then the areas that have been previously described, maybe ad nauseum in Rancho San Antonio. And the trial was to see like how many complaints were received, pro and con complaints that, about interactions, positive comments from those riding e-bikes. And it really was mixed. It turned out that most of the people who commented, kind of interestingly, were the people who were on e-bikes, because they were asking people to comment as a part of the survey that was done. And the people who were more motivated to comment were the people who were e-bike riders. And they identified that as a criteria that the public kind of decided itself. When it came to the final meeting, and I want to correct myself too, it was a 4-2 vote, not a 5-1. I remembered after I spoke previously, it was a 4-2 vote to not allow where we didn't allow and to allow where we did allow. Apologies, I'm getting tired here. Yeah, so when was the last meeting when we did do the vote, I may have said earlier the public comments, it really was split about 50-50. And there were passions on both sides. There was information that was brought forward by about other places where e-bikes have been allowed, and both in county parks and out on the coast. And there was indication of damage to trails. And so there's a cost associated with that. I'm trying to remember what else. The enforcement issue was definitely what was out there. The element of surprise because, they are quiet. The other thing too, because I haven't heard this mentioned, but the reason that we didn't allow them in other locations, and one comment that the general manager made when we started the discussion was, once you allow something, it's very, very difficult to take it back. So perhaps you guys, and up to you, but if you're going to allow e-bikes in urban parks, maybe do it on a trial basis. Again, because if you allow it citywide and then, you get a lot of complaints, it's very hard to take that back. It's very hard. Having to do with Foothill and Pearson Restadero and Esther Clark Park. A couple of the reasons that we didn't want to go and allow e-bikes in the preserves is because in those areas, which are more like the areas that you're talking about there in the preserves, is because e-bikes, because they're powered other than human power, they can go further and longer. And that meant more interaction with wildlife and more disturbance of wildlife. And that's something I hope you'll be mindful of. So I think that's all I can say in any cogent fashion this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. And I will note again that the commission ad hoc really appreciates all of the work that MidPen did in developing an e-bike policy. That's very comprehensive research. There's a lot more information, and I think Jeff can point you to some of that.
Yeah, Commissioner Oche, in page 4 in the staff report that Darren wrote, he has a link to the study that Karen was referring to that has the stats and the information.
But we work to model our policy consistent with what MidPen has developed. Does anyone else have any further comments before we close out this item? Commissioner Brown.
I'll just add that I agree with the comments made by Commissioner Krebs and Vice Chair Lemaire. I think its policy is a great start, and it's done a good job of trying to be as simple as possible, but also include the nuances of Palo Alto being different from the other agencies that have similar policies. And I think a lot of this, the enforcement will come through the public education and the signage and how we get this, the word of this policy, whatever iteration comes forward in December. Because most of the enforcement will be probably community member on community member reporting or and being respectful of one another. So I see that as being sort of the path for enforcement for this policy and important, but that will be done at the implementation level with staff.
I agree, absolutely. Thank you. Any other further comments? Okay. Thank you, Darren.
Thank you very much.
Thank you to the members of the public for your comments. We look forward to hearing more from Payback a week from now. And also look forward to moving on now. Any ad hoc committee and liaison updates? Ad hoc committee and liaison updates. And just reminding everyone that the urban forestry annual update has been deferred until next week or till next month. Okay, any commissioner, any questions, comments, or announcements regarding future agendas? Next month, we are looking at 4 items now: CIP review, advanced water purification system, coming back to us as a discussion item. This is something that we reviewed in May.
What was that one?
Excuse me?
What was the third one?
Haven't got to the third one yet.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry. CIP, advanced water purification system, racket court policy returning as an action, and the urban forestry annual report. And then for December, we're looking at a discussion on family rec center progress, coming back with an action for e-bike park and open space policy, and hopefully a discussion item on BCCP, Baylands Comprehensive Conservation Plan. Is that still on target, Darren? Okay, so if one of those, if we felt like one of those was falling out before we meet again in November, we might push one of our November items to December, so we can avoid another night like this. Thank you. With that, I will, yes, Shani?
Just, I would like to invite everyone to a symposium that the Sierra Club in Audubon are putting together about dark sky and bird safety on November 16th in the afternoon. And I will send out the invite to staff to distribute. Hopefully you can attend. We have some world-renowned experts coming to speak about these issues.
Thank you. Can you have an email forwarded to the commission with those? With that
Yeah,
information?
I'll forward an email with the invitation. It's on Zoom. You don't have to leave your home.
Thank you. And with that, we'll bring the meeting to a close. Thank you, everyone.